I didn't upload Mondays. I have to remember. I remember putting the attendance in, and I kept thinking I forgot something. It's the recording part's the thing that drives me nuts. Always forgetting it. So, sorry. Since we last were in class, I usually leave the slides open and they close. So I'm reopening them right now. Um, but anyway, let's get. I left an announcement. Um, So it's interesting. There's a number of things going on right now in the United States, and a couple of them have to do with New York. So most of you probably aware, especially if you are in the city or live in the city, you know that traffic is crazy because the opening of the General Assembly of the United Nations is going on. All that means is all the friendly people around the world get together once a year and meet at the United Nations to discuss world affairs. And there's usually some special guests, like when Malala, the young lady who was shot in the head by, I forget now.
That was Afghanistan. Or no, was it Afghanistan?
It may have been, but shot by the Taliban because she wanted to
Yeah,
have.
it was Afghanistan.
So I don't know if she's finished, but I think she was at Oxford or Cambridge, one of those schools. So she not only survived the assault, but is
Yeah.
going to one of the prestigious schools in the world. But anyway,
Good
she
for
wanted
her.
speaking at the UN one year, and another year, I don't know if which. I think she was from either Finland or Sweden, but it was a much younger girl who was talking about a cleaner world, a cleaner energy, and she has done a number of protests. I don't even know if she was 12 or 13 years old, but she's already been arrested several times fighting for a cleaner environment. So there's politics, there's economics,
Was
there's.
that Greta Thunberg?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's going on. But the other thing is, um, every quarter, the Federal Reserve meets to discuss um, matters of the Federal Reserve. And then from chapter one, we learned that they are responsible for the monetary policy of the United States. And we learned that the Congress worries about fiscal matters like taxes and how money is spent, and it's based on why we vote them in the office. The Fed worries about things like employment and inflation, um, and they control that. They can uh, issue policies that print money. They can put money into the system and pull it out. And I talked briefly about how that's done, issuing bonds or printing money, things like that. Um, but today there's going to be another one of these meetings, and the guy's name is Jerome Powell, and he is the chairman of the Fed. There's either 12 or 13 Federal Reserve branches around the United States. Number one is in Boston, number two is in New York, and so on. I know, I think nine is in San Francisco, but anyway, they're all over the U.S. And they represent the different areas of the U.S. because we spend money and we live differently, and so those Feds focus on those particular areas. I know there's one in St. Louis, there's one in Atlanta, and so they're all kind of all over the place because different areas of the United States are doing better or worse than others. And so today they're either going to raise the rate, lower the rate, or keep it at the same level that it's at right now. Um,
Yeah.
so let me put the announcement in. Um, so it's kind of interesting because these things are going on at the same time, and one of them has to do with chapter one, and the other one has to do with um, chapter three, which has to do with global
Hmm.
affairs. But as far as the Federal Reserve, sometime today, I don't know exactly what time Jerome Powell will get up and do this presentation, and he will be asked a million different questions. And for the most part, it's very long and labored, and it's the kind of thing that if you have trouble going to sleep at night,
It's perfect, huh?
it's the perfect recipe for going to sleep because it's very detailed, it's very thick, but it's also very poignant because it's dealing with the prime fund lending rate to banks. So the first thing I want to make sure you all understand is what that is. And this is something I discussed in chapter 1, and in some ways it comes up again when we go into finance. But can anyone tell me what the prime funding lending rate to banks is?
Lending to banks,
Yes.
it's gotta be like 0.9%, right?
No. Well, there's the rate, but I mean if you could tell me what, by definition, what is the prime funding?
Oh, like the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, like what is that? What is it that I'm describing?
Well, the Fed is like the government's quote unquote bank. I mean, but they lend to banks. We can't get money from the Federal Reserve.
Right, and so they lend money to the banks. So when
Right.
when the Federal Reserve, who is which is responsible for monetary policy, um, which has their marching orders are to move towards as close to full employment as possible. It's never 100% because there's students who are waiting to start jobs. There are people who are seasonal. There are the permanently unemployed who aren't looking. So it's never a perfect 100%. But those looking for jobs, they want to be as close to 100% employment. That's one of their responsibilities, and the other one is to fight inflation. Um, and I think that most of us probably are painfully aware of the impact of inflation. All you have to do is shop for food, um, say before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now, um, and a lot of other things. Buying cars during the pandemic, the prices were through the roof. Um, Energy prices, right? These are all things that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So shelter, food, health, um, transportation, these types of things are things that everyday folks need on a daily basis. And so when the prices become inflated on these things, assuming that our incomes don't go up by the same rate, it becomes painful. So on average, most people's incomes go up approximately 3% a year. When you're working, so for instance, a white collar job, of course, there's other things like bonuses and things like that, but raises, promotions. But just a normal, it's normally 3%. Inflation in a normal year is 2%, and so the idea is that you are 1% ahead of inflation. But if you look in here, what I wrote was inflation is currently, I forget where I put it, but
Well,
I
it
think
was
it's
at 8, wasn't it?
yeah, it's at 8 point something. Oh, here it is. It's at 8.2%. So that's
There we
completely
go.
out of kilter. And so the Fed, because they're responsible for this, is trying to get inflation down to 2%. Right. This was in September of 2022, and currently is at 3.67. So, and there's a thing called stickiness, which means it doesn't want to leave this number. Like they managed to get it from here, from 8.2 to 3.67. And it's kind of like it doesn't want to come off the wall, like it's stuck there, and they're trying to bring it down. And there's a couple of things that are contributing to this. Can anybody tell me why inflation is still, this high? And it may not seem like a lot, but when you look at 330 million people and all the things that we have to buy, and everything doesn't scale, meaning you can't spread the cost across every single thing. Like New Yorkers don't typically buy cars, for instance. Um, so why is it sticky? Like what's causing inflation to not want to come down the rest of the way to 2%? Any idea?
Um, Product shortages, maybe?
Say it again.
Like shortages on like pretty much everything.
So potentially there's shortages. During the pandemic, we know that people couldn't work next to each other. So anything that involved labor, like processing chickens, processing eggs. So if those of you who eat eggs know egg prices went through the ceiling. And then
Everything went up. Yeah.
making and then manufacturing, for instance, no one was driving, and so cars weren't being produced at the same rate. And then, of course, we know that there's a shortage of precious metals to build anything that has technology in it. So it's not just EVs, but gaming machines, phones, computers, all of these things. We had a shortage of precious metals, and then we had a supply chain issue because people couldn't work next to each other. So there's still some of that that's going on. But what about the fact that people are still traveling a lot for vacation?
Yeah.
So, how does that contribute to inflation staying still a bit high?
Um, I would think because like people, like there was like that huge influx of money, right? Especially during the pandemic. So people did have money and they were, they had all this money to spend, but there were shortages on everything. So that kind of cancels each other out. So that would inflate things, wouldn't it?
Yes. So there's two things there. One, you're right. There was an influx of a lot of money, and because nothing was manufactured, this became a debt to the United States. On, but and the understanding, at least from the Fed standpoint, was that they could measure how much money was put out and how much of it was spent, and they believe that there's still a lot of that in savings and is still out there to be spent. Um, and if you have a lot of money, and even if you have normal supply, the demand typically outstrips supply. And when we
Right.
in the last class, if I have a little of something that's precious that I really want, which way do the prices on that go?
Uh,
So if I have a small amount of something that everybody wants and the demand is high, which way does the price go?
Up.
Up, correct. And then the opposite is true. So if I have a lot of it and there's not as much demand, typically the price goes down. So here's a situation where people have money not only for what's left over, but um, there's still more jobs and people are out there. Not for every single type of job, but there's still more. And at some point, companies were offering just insane amounts of money to come work for their companies. For instance, during the summer, not this summer so much, but last year in the summer, um, they couldn't beg young people to come. Like if you go out to the Hamptons and stuff, they they had to shut the restaurants down early because they couldn't get enough people to actually work in the restaurants. So there was
Oh,
what they
wow.
called the great people were quitting jobs, and because there were so many jobs we had, so salaries were going up. So
Yeah.
there's a part of society that still has um, money left over, a part of society that are making a lot more money to spend, um, but the supply is not the same. The demand is high, and therefore inflation is still kind of stuck there. So there's a number of factors that are going on. Eventually, it will come down, but the other way to do this is what? Because how else do you what you would call is cool off the economy?
Hmm.
So what else what can the Fed do? Because the Fed isn't hiring all these people. The Fed, and if anything, they want people to get hired, but the Fed's not doing that. Um, but remember,
Is
they can control money supply and they can control interest rates. So what can the Fed do to cool off the economy?
do they control minimum wage?
No, that's something that's from state to state, unless you work for the federal government, um,
Right.
is controlled. That's a decision that comes down when they force companies to have to pay a certain rate. That's not their responsibility. So that's
Okay.
something to do with them.
Hmm.
That's why different states have different minimum rate wage.
Right. Yeah. Hmm.
So think about it. What can the Fed control
Interest rates.
and
Uh,
supply of money? So what can you do to cool off the economy?
I mean, you could lower interest rates, but
Well, if you lower interest rates, and you have your own company, which means you can do. How does that affect you then?
well, then you have more money to spend on production.
And production and hiring.
Right.
So therefore, if you have more money to spend,
You stimulate the economy.
correct. And so my question is, how do you cool off the economy?
How do you cool off the
not
economy?
to stimulate the economy. So the
Oh, raise interest rates.
exactly. So if you raise interest rates, then what happens with companies and hiring and even you and me as individuals and small businesses?
Yeah, loans start getting less competitive. Hiring starts taking a little stall.
Right, because
Um,
it's more expensive to borrow money. So
yeah.
what businesses will say is before when interest rates, because I put this in here, I even showed a chart, interest rates, um, well, well, I didn't put the other chart. I have another chart where it literally shows, that's weird. I thought I put that in here. It literally shows where the interest rates were really flat. Um, oh, sorry, I thought I put it in here. Anyway, I
What
wrote it
is
in.
that? The
I wrote it
2015-ish?
Well, no, not that far back, just the past couple of years. So if I go back the past couple of years, you can see where the interest rate was 0.25%. Yeah, from December 2021, the prime lending bank lending rate
Federal discount rate, yeah.
was 1/4%. So basically it was zero. It was at the bottom.
Yeah.
So if the prime is 0.25 and it costs 2% of money to manage money. So when say Citibank or Chase Manhattan gets money out of this lend it because they are the banks that are borrowing this money, it costs them 2% to manage. So they will tack on another 2%. So you probably know people who have mortgages that are just below 3% or around 3%. And so you can see why, because it was, and some of them were charging 2.25, 2.5, whatever, and then adding on to this. And then the rate went up to 0.5%. So that's why a lot of people refinance. And that's why the bank lending rate to us was just under 3%. So, but if the rates go up, and currently the rate is at 5.5, forget where I wrote this in here. I should have highlighted it. Um, where did I put it? Huh. Oh, here it is. So currently it stands at 5.5%. So the prime lending rate from the Fed is 5.5. So if you add 2%, that's 7.5. And so currently mortgages are around 7.5%. And that's why
Ugh.
the prime Fed lending rate went from as low as a quarter, almost 0%, all the way up to 5.5, which is why now if you want to buy a house,
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
if you and that's assuming you have a great FICO score, like high 700s, 800s. The FICO can go as high as 900. So if you have a really good credit score, you're going to get this.
Yeah,
Now,
that
well,
sucks.
yeah, it sucks. It's a lot. So if it's that high, then there's a even if you own a home and you refinance and you're paying around 3% for the mortgage. Let's say you decide to sell it and then you want to move into another home. You're going to have to take out a 7.5% loan. And that's assuming there's a house to be purchased. And the other thing that slowed down was building because
Yeah.
that's another one of those jobs where people had to get close to one another. And during COVID, you couldn't do that. And as it turns out, the skills are limited. So Brian says, I remember people buying houses at yes, yes, because it was down. I think at one point it did go to 0%. So you could
Yeah.
think about it, 0 plus 2% is 2%. And they probably had really, really high FICO scores and they went out and bought houses. And if you remember, if you look at, for instance, if I look at Zillow, right? Because I thought about moving to Vegas for a long time.
Oh, you
Um,
don't want to go to Vegas, man.
it's a little hot, but
That's a week is enough, trust me.
well, I've been there a few times. I used to have to go out for presentations, and then there's not as many jobs. You either work for the government or the casinos.
Yeah, it's big government work, but yeah, it's
So if I put in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I look at let's just pick a decent house. Let's go price range.
400,000 for that? Jesus.
Well, let's look at that one. Right, let's look at this, because this is a trailer. This is a double wide trailer for over
What?
40,000. Wait a minute, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Here's the thing I want to point out. I had too many things open. Well, eventually it'll come back. But anyway, Zillow, I mean, at one point Zillow was actually managing loans because there was so much money out there because money was cheap. And then they would lend it. And they have a economist which actually manages or monitors the movement of the economy. So anyway, this place was built in '69. But what I want to show you is if you go down,
Oh, the previous prices?
yeah, because I want you to see how much the place moved as soon as this. I have too many things open. So the monthly payment on this is 2,500. If you go into, here we go. So look, if I go back to March of 2019, this house was 233,000, and everything shut down in March of 2020. If this thing would move, right there, it was 251, and then at the height of the pandemic, when money was cheap, May of 2022, this thing jumped. Right, so it jumped $100,000, and the only reason it's dropping now is because interest rates are so high. But you can see what it was, right? And if I go back to 16, it was under 49,000. There's not that much difference built into this house. And if you look at other houses, you're going to see more or less the same thing. Those houses are still almost 100, say 254 in June of 2020, and now it's at 409. Right?
That's insane.
So, right, it is insane. It's $150,000 more than it was in June of 2020, and it's not going to come back down, right? And because there's a limited supply of houses, the other thing is there's not enough skilled labor of people who build houses, right? And the houses that are going to sell better are the more expensive houses. Any reason why?
I would think because stable value.
Well, no, think about everything is defined by the consumer. So think about who's buying the house.
Right, the people that have the money to spend on a house like that.
Right. So typically, if you're shopping for a house for $700,000, you're if you have cash, you don't care about interest rates.
Right,
Right. So people with a lot of money are still going to have a lot of money. And
right.
so if they can buy a house for cash, right? These are small houses. I remember when I was looking, you could buy a house, you could buy a 2,400 square foot house for $225,000.
That
Right?
seems reasonable.
Right. That seems reasonable because you can get 3 to 4 bedrooms. You can get
Look
a
at
whole
this,
family.
2,300 square feet, 560,000.
Right. So they've doubled. They've doubled.
Jesus.
Right. And this is just 7 hours ago, which means they've adjusted for the interest rates being so high. Right. So and you can look at New York, you can look anywhere you want, and it's the same thing throughout the country. And there's places that, and there are people who've lived there all their lives. This is the problem with Maui and Hawaii, because these people have their families lived where the fires were, and now their houses are burned to the ground. They can't afford to build a house because the interest rates are so high. So all they could do, if they're best, is get a trailer or an RV, park it on their land, um, and then what? When the economy cools off and things go back to normal, they still have to now come up with a couple of $100,000 to build a house. And in Hawaii, everything is shipped in, which means it's already more expensive to start with.
Yep.
So yeah,
What a mess.
you could have bought this house 3-4 years ago for $250,000, and now
Easy.
easily, very easy, and now this is where it's at. So, and housing is one of those things that the Fed will monitor because people have to live someplace, and so they look at housing starts, etc. So my question is, um, so we understand the impact on hiring, um, uh, and then I said, think about what's happening at Ford, GM, and the company that now owns Chrysler, what the company used to be called Chrysler. They just laid off 600 people during a strike because they're asking for more money, right? So my question is the Fed going to raise the interest rate, lower the interest rate, or leave it at the same today? Any ideas? I don't know the answer, obviously, because it hasn't happened yet. I can tell you, I can give you educated guess, but I can't tell you what it's going to do. So,
Um, I,
what?
I, I would like to be optimistic, but I don't know, man.
Well, the interest. Remember, the inflation is still at 3.67.
Yeah, um,
And Powell has
I-
said he has no problem with raising it and raising it and raising it,
yeah,
but he will raise it today. That's the thing.
I could see them raising it again. Does it really, depend on like the party who's like running the country? Or is
Well,
it just
it
the
turns
state of
out,
affairs?
well, as it turns out, Jerome Powell is a Republican. And
Really?
yes, and so he has been serving in his capacity under Trump and under Biden, and Biden reappointed him. He's good at it, but you know there are Democrats and Republicans who are centrist, and he's one of those guys.
Okay.
So he's good at what he does, but um, but if you go to the different um, uh, I can't think of the right word for it, but the Fed in Boston, the Fed in Atlanta, the Fed in St. Louis, you're going to go into very, very Republican areas and very, very Democratic areas. And if, for instance, if you go to the state of Texas, Texas, unlike New York, especially New York City, is pro big business, not pro small business. It's very difficult to run a small business in New York City. But
Yeah.
if you go to Texas, where you don't have a lot of money coming from the state tax going into infrastructure, it's very pro small business.
Hmm.
Same thing with Florida. So if you are head of the Fed in that particular area, like in the state of Texas, which is a very big state, um, you have a lot of small business. So the way people spend money and the way people use money is very different than the way people use money, say in New York City. So
Hmm.
whether you are left leaning, right leaning, or centrist leaning, it really only matters about how people spend money. Because remember, they're not political, they're appointed, right? So the
Right.
people who are at the head of the Fed, this isn't about the left side or the right side. It's about the economy of the United States. And so the economy of Texas, and the economy of Florida, the economy of St. Louis, and all the right to work states, in other words, states that will do everything they can to bust the union, um, are going to function and operate very differently than the states that have unions and that are um, big that are primarily run on big business, right?
So
And
it's
so,
just like a series of unfortunate events.
well, it is what it is. I mean, if you live in New York, that's where you live, and that's business. If you live,
Yeah.
you know, there's nothing wrong with running a small business. I have no problem with that, right? I'm just saying that you have to be responsive to the citizens of that particular area.
Yeah.
And they all get together and they give their information to Jerome Powell. He talks to his many economists, his statisticians, his mathematicians, and then they say, "Here's where we're at, and if you make this rate this, this, or this is the reaction. This is what's going to happen." Right?
Yeah.
Keep in
So they're
mind,
forecasting.
right? And keep in mind, we live in the Northeast,
Yeah.
and this is by quarter. So the next vote on whether the interest rate should go up or down or stays the same is going to be in 3 months. And in 3 months, we're going to be around heavy holiday period. It's going to start getting cold, and energy prices are going to go up.
Yeah.
So, so the head of the Fed in New York and the head of the Fed in Boston and places all up here along the Northeast, all the way out to Chicago, etc., are also thinking the people in their areas are going to suddenly be impacted by cold weather, and if the interest rate goes up, energy prices will probably go up because those businesses still have to run themselves, and they
Yeah.
basically say, well, if my costs go up, your costs go up,
Yeah.
as opposed to if you live in Florida or San Diego, etc. I mean, parts of Texas can get real cold too, but anyway, they're
Yeah.
not going to be nearly as impacted the way we get impacted.
It's just like dominoes, man. Like it's just like one thing leads to another.
There's a causal a reaction to everything. Right?
Crazy.
So anyway, so I thought this would be real interesting because of what's going on. So now I would, if all of you should keep an eye out for this. If you don't have cable or TV or whatever, you could, like I mentioned on the first day, some of the things you should listen to or watch is Bloomberg TV, because it's free and you can stream it online wherever you are, and it's going to be the talk of today. So if you look at, I have too many tabs open, but if you watch Bloomberg television, um, normally there's a screen in here and whatever's going on, it's going on live. You could see it, um, and they're going to be talking about it. It's going to be the story. Follow Bloomberg. No, it's something. Anyway, I would look at this because it's still coming in. And the other thing I would look at is, let's see, what are they talking about? Bloomberg Markets Live New York is focused, bringing you. No, it's just a general thing. Anyway, it's gonna whenever it winds up coming up, you can, yeah, see they're already reporting because the
Maybe
market's open at
20%
9 o'clock
lower.
on the East Coast, in the United States, so they're going to be reporting on the market. So whether it's domestic or international, but they'll say something about this, and they'll say something about what's going on at the UN. The other place you can look, of course, is if you look at Yahoo. Whoops, forward slash. If you look at yahoo.com / finance, they will have the streamers that run across. Soft landing won't be an on moment. See, for the Fed, right? So this is the analysis. It has nothing to do with airplanes. It has to do with, they're saying, are we going to hit the ground hard and people are going to be impacted in an adverse way, or not? And that's actually Jerome Powell right there. Fed expected to stand pat, signal another rate hike.
Yeah,
So they're
that's what I
waiting.
figure.
So all the analysts and all the economists are waiting.
Did they say they were gonna raise the rates today?
They haven't
I
said it
know
yet.
there was a.
That's what we're waiting for. That's exactly the
Okay.
question, Christina. That's why I was asking. It's like, what do you think, right? Because they haven't. We're waiting for Jerome Powell to get up, and all the news cameras, the business people, the analysts, they're going to be sitting and leaning in, and he's going to start yarning on, and he says, and so it's for this reason that we've decided, and then they're going to say it.
Oh boy.
So we don't know we don't. Today's the day. See, rates now stand in the range of 5.25 to 5.5 the following 11 rate hikes, right? Following 11 hikes since March of 22. So these
Most aggressive
things
action.
up and up and up and up. Right.
11 hikes is ridiculous because they're raising rates every month.
Every quarter.
Yeah, like that's ridiculous.
So this is Jerome Powell. So today so I would just keep an eye out. And like I said, you can watch Bloomberg, you can watch Yahoo Finance. And the only reason I put this here is you can see how fast it's going. In the
That's
past,
insane. Look at that.
yeah, these are quarters, right? So over quarters, they were showing how fast they were going up. So each one is a different color. So whatever this, I don't even see orange up there. But anyway, you can see this is the fastest. But we've also never been in a situation where everybody was said you got to stay home for almost 3 years,
Yeah.
and the government had to print a lot of money, right? So anyway, and the first class, the thing I didn't show, I put it on in Blackboard, but there's the debt clock. I don't know if anybody looked at it because I ran out of time.
It's trillions of dollars.
But the debt clock, yeah, the national. Oh, this is over near Madison Square Garden. They used to always have that clock. I don't know if it's still there or not.
Maybe.
It basically is always moving. So this is the one that you can see online. So if you look at this,
Jesus.
you can see the U.S. national debt is at
$33 trillion.
but this is a live clock. It literally is moving right now. So this is 100,000, 704 million, 43 billion, 33 trillion. So our U.S. national debt is 33 trillion. And if you notice, it actually shows per taxpayer, each so Christina, your amount is 254,961. Mine's is 254,961. Everybody, each person, they say if you took 330 million people, which is what the population in the US, subtract out the young people like babies, because obviously they're not taxpayers, and only included the taxpayers, this is how much. So debt per citizen is this, debt per taxpayer is this.
So
So
essentially,
this is,
everybody's in the hole 100 grand.
so if you have a 2-year-old, this is the 2-year-old's debt. So
Gee.
this is what I mean by saying we're putting debt on our future citizens. And
This
here's
is psychotic.
in the US federal tax revenue, this is how much money they get from federal tax, not the state or city, but the federal tax, right?
Okay,
So if you look at this,
so that's
they
4
collect
trillion.
on 4 trillion, and this is what our debt is,
Okay.
right? And then they break it down to payroll tax and income tax, etc. So you can literally look at all of it. And here's our population. So I'm always looking at this one because I'm thinking right now some woman is pushing out a baby, and this number is going to go to 3.
Yeah, like I have no debt, which is, but apparently I got 100 grand in debt.
Right. Yes, you have. Yes. So I
That's
mean,
crazy.
and then this is the M2, which is the money supply, the money being printed, right? And then the
Wow.
U.S. Treasury, how much money they're collecting. Well, somehow I must have clicked on something.
Credit and derivatives.
So anyway, I put this, I think on the earlier on, I think it was chapter 1 or something like that. I put this. So if you want to look at what this is, and it gives you a real strong understanding in black and white of our national debt. And this is how much
Wow.
we're spending to GDP. So 0 would be, for everything that we make, we make $1 worth, we spend $1 worth. So we're 37% of GDP, etc. So lots of good information in here. So you're obviously welcome to
Yeah,
take a look at
that's
it. But
pretty
the debt
interesting.
clock, it used to be right up there on the top of this building next to Madison Square Garden. And you could literally walk up the block from Macy's and look up and see this thing, and you could see the debt. Now, Clinton and Obama actually flattened it out one year, but they flattened out the year debt. In other words, for every dollar we spent, we made enough to cover it. So we actually slowed down the debt clock under one year under Clinton and 1 year under Obama. So anyway, let me
Is there
close.
any way to crawl out from under this?
Yeah, we have to stop spending so much money, because remember the last class I said there's some money we spend that we as a country have decided that we're going to continue to spend on those things. We have military bases in almost 100 countries, right? And so
Yeah,
well, it's not free.
yeah, that's true.
Right,
I
it's
would,
not
I
free.
would rather us have a strong military though, honestly.
Well, I mean, I understand the reason, and I understand why you say that, and I'm okay with that. And then
Yeah,
there's going to be people who want less of it, and some people want more of it. And
yeah,
for the GSA schedule on an annual basis is 100 million. That
right,
means that the government will spend $100 million, and this isn't just for military. It could, put up a couple of extra traffic lights or whatever. But there's the
right.
GSA schedule, and they're going to spend it, even if they have to overprice things, because no congressperson wants to be that person who said, "Give me this much money in taxes," and then didn't spend it, because they're like, "You took this out of my pocket, and then
Right.
you didn't spend it, so we're not going to vote you back in." So there's billion, not million, $100 billion just in the
100
DSA
billion.
schedule. Just
Wow.
that amount alone. Right. And then we have healthcare, we have Social Security.
In Ukraine too, geez. We spent more in
And
Ukraine than we did the entire war in Afghanistan.
well, there's all these things that we have committed taxpayer dollars to, um, and we're moving over the clean energy, which is expensive, and
Yeah, but isn't clean energy run on coal?
no, that's dirty energy. So clean
How,
energy is like hydro, solar.
oh,
uh,
like but I thought like the whole electrical grid runs on coal.
it does, but that's not clean energy.
That's dirty energy.
Right. If we switch
Okay,
over to solar, like if everybody's house had a solar panel, with the excess would go into the grid, and now we would have clean electric energy.
Oh,
So you
okay,
got to think of the source of the energy.
right.
All right. So, all right, let's let's keep moving. All right. So, any questions about what I just finished talking about? Because I thought it was very relevant because the general session, the UN is in general session, and normally, because I live in Long Island City, they have. I remember when Ahmadinejad was still in power and alive, people like that, or years ago when Castro would come to New York, there would be Navy cutters, the Coast Guard, and New York NYPD boats sitting out in the East River because there was a lot of people in the world that wanted to kill them.
Yeah,
So we don't have as many because these are still considered countries that are part of NATO and the friendly countries. And sometimes we want the bad people to speak too.
mm,
And the only place you're going to meet them all is the UN. But that's a great place to kill a lot of people from a lot of powerful nations at one time. So that there would be um, 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 boats from Fed, state, and local sitting out in the East River with guys sitting on the boats with guns. And when I first moved to LIC, they would even have the frogmen jump over the pier and do military moves because these buildings face the UN. And so the concern was someone would just go to the top. And so we were told not to loiter around our living room and bedroom windows or go on the top of the building with any kind of objects that look like a gun.
probably a good idea.
Yeah, it's so. All right, so I'm going to move on. So let's finish off chapter 3. So let's get into these other questions. So the first, where we left off, I'm looking at my notes. Um, we had talked about the benefits and fear of globalization. So the next thing we want to look at are barriers to trade. So there are natural barriers, there are non-financial barriers, and there are financial barriers. So can anybody tell me what a natural barrier to trade is?
What, like a mountain or an ocean?
Yeah, they could literally be just geographic topological barriers. So if you think about trading with Asia and Europe, we have the two largest oceans in the world,
Mhm.
right? There could also be natural barriers to trade because of access to resources,
Mhm.
right? Um, these can also create opportunity, right? So, so the next one we typically think of are tariffs and non-tariff barriers. So, can someone tell me what a tariff is and what a tariff barrier is?
Um, are tariffs taxes on products that are being imported?
Yes. So tariff is exactly what you said, Martin. Is a tax. In other words, an additional fee that's added on to. So when Toyota sends the cars into the United States, a tariff is added on to that car that Toyota has to pay for. Obviously, they pass that cost on to the consumer, but they have to pay that tax to bring the car into the U.S. And there are punitive and non-punitive tariffs. So can you tell me the difference between a punitive tariff and a non-punitive tariff? Say for
A non-punitive tariff would, I would assume would be the policies and regulations that the companies have to abide by to ship their products into a country.
so so for instance with a car, and Toyota got in trouble with, I mean Volkswagen got in trouble with this, I don't know if it was 5 or 6 years ago. They have to send it with safety glass. So if you're ever
Mm,
driving in a car and you get into an accident, what they don't want to have happen is the glass turns into large shards, like a big, I don't know how to explain it, but like breaking into large where one piece could literally go through your body and cut you in half.
Yeah.
Safety glass breaks up into lots of tiny little bits. Now, granted, it could get in your eyes and stuff, but after a lot of testing, they realized that most people cover their face, and even if they get it in, they can get it out, and maybe even scratch the eyeball. But it's safer there with that than to have a shard of glass slice through your artery and you bleed out
And
immediately.
you, yeah,
And so any car that's made in the US or outside the US coming in has to have that. And the other thing is it has to have certain emission controls. You can't bring a car in that's belching out heavy fumes, especially in the state of California, which leads the country. Well, Volkswagen started shipping cars in with a catalytic converter that strangled the engine to keep the soot from coming out. And after X number of miles, it would naturally break and die off. And then the car would perform better, but all the soot was coming out. And so the US government sued Toyota in Germany because they allowed the car to come in, and they sued, not Toyota, I don't know why I keep saying Toyota. They sued
Volkswagen.
For doing this. So, so Christina, that is not a punitive tax. That is a non-punitive tax. In other words, the tax is for the car to come in, and then that money goes to pay for, and that's how they found out that Volkswagen was bringing these cars in that were not meeting regulation. Now, the suit wasn't a tariff, but the suit was punitive because they did something wrong. And so they said, okay, now you got to pay for what you did wrong. That's different. That's just a lawsuit, right? You know, brought on by the U.S. Attorney General against a company outside the U.S. that harmed U.S. citizens. So that is a normal tariff because that money goes to pay for the people who inspect the cars. So, for instance, actually New Jersey has the bigger port, but someone has to go out there and look at the tankers, look at the containers, make sure that they are meeting regulation of the United States. If anyone lives in Lower Brooklyn or Staten Island, you see these big, massive ships with the back of a trailer truck. Those things stacked 10, 20 high, hundreds of them all over these ships. The reason they're there is they have to come into port. They have to not only be removed off those ships, but they have to be inspected. And some of them, people have like people in it, like, stowed away inside these tankers trying to sneak into the US. Some of them have drugs in it. Some of them have guns in it. And some of them have products that shouldn't be coming into the US. Like you can't bring elephant tusks into the US. So there's things that are done wrong, like with the car. There are things that have no business coming in here. Maybe there are things that can come in here, but they're putting extra in there so that they're not having to pay the normal tax. So they're trying to get away with a discount on the tax, a million different things. Now, the people who operate the ports are private businesses, but the physical port itself is built by the cities and states and the federal government. That has to be paid for. So those tariffs are normal taxes to pay for all this stuff, right? So that's a non-punitive tariff. So what is a punitive tariff? Something that's harsh.
right.
So can somebody give me an example of a punitive tariff?
A fine,
For
for any regulation violations.
So keep going. Like, give me an example.
So like for instance, you gave the example of elephant tusk, right?
Yeah.
It's illegal to ship them to the United States. Now, because it's illegal, one of the what they would have to deal with is possible imprisonment and fines for disregarding the regulations of the United States
So I agree with you,
or
and
trade
that's
agreements.
okay. Hold on to what the last thing you said. We're going to come back to that. I agree with everything you said up until then, but a tariff is a tax, a fine is a fine, and even imprisonment. So this is where the United States will sue a company or if the person is standing on U.S. soil, we'll arrest that person. And if we have jurisdiction with another country to bring them into the U.S., we can certainly do that. Or on the other side, so that we don't get into problems with other countries, that country may also arrest that person, right? So all of that stuff is true, but those aren't tariffs. But when
Don't they
you
put,
said, but
I'm
wait a
sorry.
minute, what Christina said, the last thing you said was, and I don't remember exactly what your words were, but you talked about trade agreements. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yes.
So can you expand on that? Because that does have something to do with punitive tariffs.
So, trade agreements are like policies that are in place between countries when they do shipments.
Keep
So
going.
like let's say like China and the United States, they have a trade agreement
Right.
and they have to abide well, when they trade with the United States, where they import their goods, they're taxed at a certain rate, right? Whether it's 5%, whatever the tax rate is, they're given that tax rate, and vice versa.
So but give me an example, or make one up, but give me an example of where.
Okay, like corn. Corn is a major product that's outsourced for animal feed, right? And a lot of corn is bought from the United States. So they ship the corn to different countries. One of them happens to be China, and they have an agreement that they would pay a certain amount of taxes to import the corn into China.
Okay, I'm still not understanding. Um, I'll give you one. Let's talk. Remember, look at it from the U.S., not from the China, because right now
You're talking about tariffs, right?
punitive tariffs. So look at it.
Oh, I guess okay. Now I thought you were talking about tariffs. I'm sorry. The punitive tariffs would be like if that trade agreement that's in place, if the United States violates any agreement that China and the United States have with each other, China can then impose some type of tariff for that violation.
Right. So just to make it easier, and like I said on Monday, let's look at it from the U.S. point of view so that we don't get in. That's because we could wind up getting very convoluted with so many countries. So if we have an agreement with a country and they're supposed to send product into the U.S. and we put a regulation in and they do something against that regulation, we can impose a punitive tariff, which basically is like a fine in a sense, but not called a fine because legally you can't call it a fine, but it's like a fine. And so if we think about, for instance, whether it's China shipping product in, or even closer, Mexico, and because there's a real example in Mexico, because it turns out that the tomatoes that come out of Mexico taste better than the tomatoes that come out of the U.S. And so remember, I don't care if it's furniture or clothes or whatever, these are all industries. And so the industry within the agriculture, and within agriculture, the group that actually grows tomatoes went to their congressman, their senator, they went to the federal government and said, we can't compete with China because the cost to make our tomatoes is more expensive, and we can't create the same quality because the earth is different in the US than it is in Mexico. And we need the federal government to step in and do something about it. So if Mexico were to ship more tomatoes in a sneaky way or something like that, and using your words, basically uh, counter to the trade agreement, right? Then the U.S. then says, okay, if you're going to ship these in, we're going to slap a tariff on it. And by doing that, so let's say you're only allowed to bring in 10 million metric tons of tomatoes, and you decided to send 11 or 12 or whatever we found out. Well, we're going to slap a tariff on that extra, right? And that way, the U.S. Farmers say, well, now we can compete because now it's equal price. And in some cases, they'll even say, this used to be the case with steel. The Japanese, believe it or not, were able to produce steel more efficiently And as a result, remember, efficiency is what you do to drive costs down. By lowering their costs, they can protect their profit, but they could also then also lower the price. And so the steel coming in from Japan was priced lower than the steel that was being produced in the U.S. And so the U.S. said, you can send this much steel in, and everything after that, we're going to slap a tariff on. And so the federal government was essentially saying, we're going to protect the U.S. industries by tariffing anything that that's coming into the U.S. that jeopardizes U.S. industry. Now, and they can do this from zero. They can say, if you want to send one of those products because you jeopardize U.S. industries, we're going to slap a tariff, so that we create parity. In other words, if you're going to compete against a U.S. product, then it's going to be U.S. quality versus whatever country's quality. But we're not going to be put in a situation where your prices are artificially lower, and so therefore the U.S. industries are going to go bust because they can't compete against them, right? So that is a punitive tariff when they go over, if they do anything. And sometimes because of geopolitical reasons, we get into these tariffs that have nothing to do with pricing. It's just that our country hates another country and they hate us. And so we wind up tariffing the crap out of each other, and it winds up washing out in the balance. And then the countries go somewhere else. Like same thing with oil. Every time we get into a fight with Russia, which produces a lot of oil, we go to Saudi Arabia and say, we need more oil from you. So there's all kinds of nonsense that goes on like that. There's the other side of the argument with that. The number one guy in strategy and competition at Harvard, Michael Porter, says he would rather do away with these and force all countries and all companies and industries within those countries to find more innovative ways to produce higher quality and to do it in a more efficient way. And because when you slap tariffs outside of the cost tariffs, in other words, you got to build the ports, we have to do inspection. Outside of that part of it, which is the non-punitive tariff, when you do that, what winds up happening is that the local, let's say, looking from the U.S. standpoint, they don't have to be innovative. They don't have to create more efficient ways of producing. They don't have to create more quality product. And not only do consumers in other countries suffer, but the U.S. consumer suffers, because you wind up paying a higher price for something that's not as good. What Porter is saying is force competition, which then means that you have to come up with a better product, and you have to be more efficient to come up with a lower cost to be able to do these things. And therefore, everybody who consumes these products and services will benefit, right? So there's that back and forth, but that's that. Now, so we know what a non-punitive and what a punitive tariff is. Punitive is usually when someone else does something wrong. That's the whole point of punitive, right? But what about non-tariff barriers? So not natural, not something where you're paying money, but something where you don't pay money. Can anybody give me an example of a non-tariff barrier?
Well, non-tariff barrier is like regulations and stuff, right?
Right. Like there's some cases where you have ridiculous bureaucracy, right? It's like you got to do this paperwork, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Matter of fact, our regulations around the emissions of a car and safety glass in a car is a non-tariff barrier. Those companies have to step up and do those. Are there any others?
Let's see, like probably like licenses. What else? Like, would like an embargo be a non-trade barrier?
Embargo is a very good one.
Oh, okay.
That's the ultimate barrier.
Oh, see, there we go.
Yeah, that's when John gets on his big ship and goes out there and block Cuba.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I've never been on a ship.
Well, okay, well, we can imagine. So, but if you think about they say the oil embargo, when the U.S. ports were being blocked by Britain when we were in the American British War, which we call the American Revolution. When we think about now, it's not just ships, but by airplane. There are embargoes to countries that we don't like and that we've been at war in and with, like North Korea, like Cuba, like Iran, right?
Yeah.
We have created embargoes directly and with our allies that they don't get certain goods, right? So these are non-tariff, these are not natural, these are non-tariff barriers. What about quotas? You're only
Okay.
allowed to bring X amount into our country, right? So that's a quota, right? So these are ways to create barriers to trade, and the idea, because the next thing we want to talk about is, and by the way, when we control the value of currency, these are also ways to create barriers. So remember, I talked to you on Monday about ways to lower the value of, say, the yuan in China, or leave it alone and increase the strength of the U.S. dollar, which encourages U.S. citizens to buy Chinese goods, or not just between U.S. and China, but any country, right? So I can literally create barriers by creating a punitive um, um, expense. Again, looking from the U.S. out, we can certainly do any other country, but just to simplify this, by making the U.S. dollar more expensive to buy certain things, but make it less expensive to buy things from another country. All right. So, and then, by the way, there's the example with Mexico and tomatoes is real. There was another one called dumping. Thailand, because their labor costs are so low, were producing, believe it or not, #2 pencils at a much lower rate. And before there was any kind of barrier in place or quota in place, they started shipping over these very inexpensive pencils in the US until the US industry stood up and said, wait a minute, we can't sell any of our pencils because Thailand is literally dumping, to the point where they were doing it below cost. Like they're like, look, we'll take a loss in this, but we just want to get this revenue stream going, right? All right. So what is the WTO and what is GATT and what is the difference?
Well,
So
no, the WTO is the World Trade Organization.
correct. And so what was their, what were they responsible for? Why were they there in the first place?
I mean, like they're responsible for like like all the trade agreements and stuff like that.
And why did we have, what was the whole point of creating trade agreements?
Well, it's like a governing body, right?
So that's what it is, but what was their purpose?
I don't know. It's a great question. I mean, I would think to keep things civil
Yeah, that's what I was about
and
to say,
organized.
to avoid conflict and keep it organized.
Okay, but for what purpose?
I mean, like it could like settle trade disputes or something like that, or
So I will give you this. They were there to create a policy around, and they would, we already had a chapter on ethics, this is right, this is wrong. But what was the purpose of it? Like, you're talking about some of the things that they took on as responsibility.
right.
So, but what was the primary purpose? Because what you're saying is when they don't do whatever this purpose is, we're going to settle these problems so we can get back to why we exist in the first place.
Oh, for to keep free trade flowing.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
So the idea was to encourage trade. So as we opened up markets around the world and industries around the world, whether it's the U.S. shipping to other countries, countries shipping into the U.S., the idea was, how do we create world trade, right?
Okay.
Because if the U.S. is selling product within the U.S., there's only so many U.S. citizens that are going to buy it, right?
Right.
Under Bush and under I'm trying to think of the other person, they wanted to nationalize and be nationalistic and say, we're going to make in the US and sell to the US. And if other people want it, they can buy it, but we're not bringing anybody's stuff, any other country's stuff in. And this
Probably
is a
Reagan.
is when you do that, you basically say, oh, you want us to buy your stuff, but you're not going to, you're not going to buy ours. So therefore, we're not going to ship anything there. And then we get into this kind of like, well, I don't like you. Well, I don't like, I mean, it's nonsense.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So at some point you have to open it up. And when American citizens travel to Europe and Asia and stuff like that, and they get a taste of some of these things that are different, they want to bring that stuff home, and they want to be able to buy that kind of stuff. And the internet certainly opened up a lot because the internet is basically free. It's port 8080, and once you're out there, you can see the whole world in a snapshot. You actually wind up realizing there's stuff that people. My mother always was into things from Italy, from Egypt, and from China. She always wanted a Ming Dynasty door for some reason, right? Mm-hmm. And I traveled a lot in Asia, and these things are very expensive. But she would look at the web and try to find one. I mean, it's just human nature. You want stuff, you know?
Right.
So the WTO created policy around free trade, and also created policy to say, here's the quota, this is what you can and here's what you can't do. And year after year, they would open it up to more and more countries. And then they would put voting rights in because the more you buy from other countries, you get more voting rights, right? Because you're putting more, you're growing economies around the world. The less you buy, you get less voting rights because you're not impacting the world in a positive way by growing the other economies. So obviously countries like the US and the G8 have more rights, more voting rights in that. Mm. Now, eventually, the WTO, and of course, there's always two sides to everything. The arguments, I remember they had this big meeting of the WTO in Seattle, and all the young people went there and said, you're causing jobs to go overseas because you're opening up trade. And so factories and companies in the US are shutting down and producing overseas. And that's kind of gone back and forth. Even companies like Apple are now producing more and more in the US because, you know, there's a million reasons. I don't want to get too much into the politics of it, but there's just be aware that there's that pushback on it. Well, eventually they had to form an organization called GATT. Does anyone know what GATT stands for? Because it replaces WTO.
Isn't that the general agreement for trade?
And we just finished talking about it. Yes, trade and tariffs, or tariffs and trades. Exactly. Okay. And so they replaced the WTO. They do everything the WTO did, but one other thing, that the WTO was never, whatever the legal term is to say that you can do this. They couldn't. And the GATT can do it. So everything we talked about was policy. But Christina, you used the word that I didn't want to say anything then because I didn't want to muddle the understanding of what WTO is. But you used the word that we would use in GATT, that GATT can do.
I don't remember what I said.
That's perfectly fine. I understand, because you had no idea I was listening into it, and then it's just like, oh, he's going to remind me about it, of course. But you said something about, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember your exact word, but you used something to the effect of enforcement. WTO couldn't enforce anything. They were never given power, because imagine you can't go from the US to another country, which is a sovereign nation, and say, we're going to impose this on you, right? You can create wars over stuff like that.
Oh,
but
sure.
we finally got together and said, you know what? Here's the policy. Here are the rules. This is what you do. And if you don't do it, now all the countries got together and voted and say, and it's kind of like you got a bully in the room, and the bully gets away with stuff, and nobody can do anything about it. And if they do, you get into a war. Now they're saying, if you do something wrong, we all come together and say, you can't bully all of us. You do what we say, or you don't get to play in our game. That's kind of the enforcement. So GATT takes it one step further, because remember we talked about past the political and legal, and political is like policy. Legal is like when a cop goes and says, look, I don't write the laws, all I do is enforce them. That's the enforcement side. So now GATT can also enforces, and I would not be surprised if at the general session at the UN, to a certain extent, this comes up, because they're probably going to talk about Ukraine. They're probably going to talk about the BRICS that's expanding now, these new economic zones, the fact that China is getting in bed with Russia, they're already in bed with China, and even talking about using their currency and not the US currency. All of these things impact economies, and trade impacts economies, and how they work with one another, right?
So what about sanctions?
Well, think about it. What is a sanction? If I say you can't bring your product,
Right, it would be a trade barrier, right?
you've been sanctioned.
Yeah.
And normally, but think about when we were in fighting with Afghanistan and Iran, etc. They were like, you can't. We're sanctioning Russia right now.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So and that's over political matters and war. Because remember, politics was invented as a substitute to war.
Mm.
It's kind of like marriage counseling.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
The counselor has the ego, unfortunately, in politics. In the counselor's office, they typically don't have an ego. All right. The next thing is, what is the World Bank and what is the IMF? Now, both of them were, World Bank was created in 1944 and IMF was created in 1945. What happened just before that and ended in 1944-45?
Oh, that was World War II.
Exactly. You will find a lot of things happen in modern economics as a result of World War II. And these two things are two of them.
Right. So IMF is, I want to say Impossible Mission Force, but it's not.
Impossible Mission Force. Okay, you
Yeah.
made it up. So
Yeah, it's the monetary fund. I know that.
Yes. So what happened in World War II? Who got the snuff kicked out of them?
Oh, Germans all day.
Germans. And so what did America do afterwards?
Well, it was split up between East and West Germany with the Russians and the United States.
No. What did they do? Look at it from a business standpoint.
What did the US do to Germany?
Yes.
We sanctioned them, didn't we?
How did the US make money?
How did they make money?
Typically, when America goes in and beats the snot out of another country, they go back.
Oh, they built it up.
They build it back up.
Yeah.
For free?
No.
No. So they go in and says, okay, we'll put the roads in, we'll put your telecommunications back in. Okay, BMW.
Are you talking about Ukraine?
Say it again.
Are you talking about Ukraine?
No, World War II.
Oh, okay.
Right. So Ukraine is different, right? We're trying not to put boots on the street, on the ground there, because Ukraine is not part of NATO. And if they were, then all the NATO countries, basically, the bully would get bullied by a bunch of countries. That's politics. I don't teach politics. So, I mean, I understand it, but I don't teach that. So my point is, after World War II and after a lot of wars where we literally go into countries and kick the holy snot out of them, and this is why we invaded, we went after, not Saddam Hussein. Yeah, Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, Iraq. Yeah.
Right. We wanted and got into Kuwait and stuff like that because of all the oil. We wanted to go in and rebuild the oil industry at a cost. And since they had all this oil, those in power in the U.S. is like, we're going to get paid for a long time for this. And then the vice president under Bush, who was formerly the chairman of, can't think of the name of the company. Halliburton. That's why they had blind bids, and those guys were going in to start rebuilding things so they can then say, hey, look, we've already invested in it. You got to pay for this. And since they're sitting on all of this oil, they're like,
they made so much money.
They make so much money. And this is stuff going on behind the scenes. So my point is that we typically nation build, but we don't go in for free. And even during economic times, like during the time that Asia economically in the 90s fell, this is usually when the U.S. goes in and buys up their debt at a price. Even companies, GE was famous for buying up nations' debt and then charging them at a lower rate, but they would still charge them and knowing that they could pay it back. Now they're not going to go into Amazonia or Papua New Guinea. They're going to go into a place where there's the possibility of paying it back. Anyway, so what happened was, so in 1944, the World Bank was created, and in 1945, the International Monetary Fund was created. And both of them, believe it or not, are headquartered in Washington, D.C. But normally, and it's no like hard and fast rule, if an American's running one, there's someone in Europe running the other one. So I think it's Lagarde. I can't think of her first name. She actually got her education in the U.S. and she's French. I think she's running IMF, and I don't know who's running World Bank, or I may have it backwards. But the purpose of the World Bank was, and you can see how this works, and it's actually not the first one to do this. There's an African bank, global bank that did this first. But their purpose is their purpose, their reason for existing, is to provide loans for developing countries to build up their industries and businesses to then become strong economically, but produce things that other people want. So imagine in Ghana, which produces 20 to 30% of the cocoa, and that's a very strong industry, or Afghanistan, where around 20 or 25% of the cotton in the world comes from. Even though there's problems over there, people like to wear clothes, and it's a very strong industry. They will give them a loan. So we're talking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And IMF's purpose is to go into places where countries get into trouble with their debt obligations. So they put austere measures in. It says, okay, you got to lay off half all these people. You got to work overtime, and you got to institute these practices. So like Greece is a pain in the butt for Germany. So Germany is the parent and Greece is like the troubled child. And even when they became an economic union, right, one big economic union, Greece has a problem with overstaffing, paying for having a huge pension system, people taking siestas in the middle of the day, taking 2 months vacations, and just not producing at a high level. And you may say, well,
Greece.
Tell Greece to go screw themselves. Well, the problem with Greece is we can thank Greece for mathematics. We can thank Greece for olive oil, which is actually controlled by the mafia now. We can also thank Greece for building tanker ships. So if you think back to 4 or 5 years ago when tankers were hanging out in the Pacific Ocean and they couldn't get into the US ports, and even before that, there weren't enough in the world, they're being produced out of Greece. So if you see a tanker in the bay outside of Staten Island, just below the Verrazano Bridge near Brooklyn, a lot of those tanker ships were built in Greece. So you got a society that says, I'll get to work when I get to work. I'm on a cigarette break. I'll be back in a month. Or I need a pension. Or we need 5 more people to do this job. That's where it was coming from. So we couldn't just say go away. And so Germany kept bailing them out, right? So in that case, and in other cases, the IMF steps in and says, okay, we will give you $100 billion. We will give you 25 billion. We'll give you this, we'll give you that. And all these nations put money in together to help build these. And then, of course, they take a little piece of the action. It's kind of like they're the investors and the investors get a little something back. And they have to pay it back, right? And in order to get the money, they have to stick with the austere measures that are imposed on them. Now, the interesting story around Greece is that Singapore, this tiny, tiny little country on the equator, with only 7 million people, have decided to get into the tanker building business. Matter of fact, these countries also make cruise ships. So if you've ever been on a cruise ship or look at a cruise ship and you look at the flags, you will see that there are more than one flag. So if you go on a Disney cruise, there'll be an American flag. There'll be a flag for that they call flagging. So like Tonga, and trying to think of this other country that's an island, the Marshall Cook Islands. They have nothing of resource and they're being covered over by the Pacific Ocean because of global warming. but you'll see their flag on the ship. They get paid the fee. And what it means is they're a sovereign nation that has certain things that you're allowed to do. That allows that ship to do those things on that ship, especially when they're in international waters. And then you'll find another flag on that ship that represents where the ship was built. So you can literally find 3 flags on the ship. You can find one. It could be a ship out of the Marshall Cook Island, built in the Marshall Cook Island for the purpose of tourism for the Marshall Cook Island, or Greece or whatever. But typically you see 3 different flags, and that's why. And so Singapore recognized that there's a demand and need for ships, and they decided they're going to make it more with robotics. So they're going to be more efficient, less lazy, with very efficient process, build quality ships. And so they've been building up their shipbuilding business. And Germany is smiling because they're like, we're going to finally, we'll figure out the olive oil thing, but we're going to finally stop having to, because building tanker ships is a very expensive business. Remember the factors of production. The capital equipment are these multi-million dollar robotic machines. The sourcing of raw material, because you're building, these things are huge. They're very, and the labor, it's very expensive. So Singapore is saying, you know what, we're getting in this business and we're going to make it more efficiently, and we're going to lower the cost, which preserve our profit and sell it at a better price. So they're putting pressure on Greece. So it's an interesting story. But that's where the World Bank comes in. They help provide loans to developing nations. And if you read through the chapter, there's different types of development banks around the world. The first one was out of Africa. And the IMF is to help countries meet their debt obligations when they get in trouble. Well, as it turns out, the World Bank has gotten into that business too, because a lot of countries around the world have gotten into a lot of problems, especially countries where they were trying to create new business. Right. So that's the story there. And then I mentioned this on the first day. We talked about the WTO and its purpose. Well, then we have countries, some are neighboring countries like the US, Mexico, and Canada, which have the NAFTA trade agreement, so North American Free Trade Agreement, because they realize you've got trucks going back and forth across the Mexican-American border, and to a smaller degree across the Canadian. Like, we get a lot of trees from Canada. People don't realize that Canada geographically, topologically, is a very big country.
It's massive.
But there's only like 35 million people in the whole country.
Yeah.
Because most of them live along the US border. But if you go north of it to the Yukon, and now I'm not promoting the idea of knocking all their trees down, but they make a lot of money on selling wood into our country, right? And then of course there's their maple syrup, and I'm sure they got some other stuff that we like that they have too. And then there's tourism back and forth, right? So, and then Mexico, of course, the labor is super inexpensive, and they make a lot of stuff, even for the US companies. And because they're so close, it's just a truck ride across. So the idea is, let's get rid of the tariff between the borders, and let other industries subsidize the cost of putting the borders up, the patrols, the control systems, but let commerce open up even more to build the economies on both sides. Okay. And then there's CAFTA. So that's the Central American Free Trade Agreement. There are others in Asia, like the Asiatic. The one that people are most familiar with is OPEC, right? Oil producing emirate countries. So Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, believe it or not, Nigeria, believe it or not, Venezuela. So you're like, wait a minute.
Venezuela has a ton of oil.
And Venezuela is South America. Remember, to create an economic zone, it does not mean that it has to physically be next to one another, right? So what they do, which in the US is against the law, is they meet and decide what the price of a barrel of oil would be. That's called collusion, which is illegal in this country, right? When Apple made the tablet and Amazon made the reader, there's a famous story and they have proof through emails that these two men got on a plane, flew from Seattle, flew from Santa Clara County near San Francisco into New York, met in a bar, and said, what price should we set to sell a book on the reader and the tablet? When they opened their mouths and said that, when they had that meeting to discuss price fixing and
Collusion.
collusion on how much money they can make over there, they instantly, and remember, they flew from one state to another state. So it went from a local offense, a state offense, to a federal offense. They committed federal crime. But you can't tell Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and these other countries what they can and can't do. And so OPEC exists to prop up these oil emirates, these countries that make oil. Now, what's fascinating about it is Venezuela produces a lot of oil. And here's the thing also that's fascinating. And the New York Fed, by the way, if you're ever in Lower Manhattan, you get off Pier 11 and scoot across the island, you go past this building with like very few doors, no windows, and these not just barred windows, but like these bars are probably 5 inches thick. That's the New York Fed. They used to have gold in the bottom. They, I forget one of the Bruce Willis movies about them stealing the gold out of the bottom, but
Oh yeah. Die
guess-
Hard with a Vengeance.
right, that's the movie. So with Samuel Jackson. So guess which Fed in the United States manages the fees and the processing of financing for oil? The New York Fed. You may say, well, wait a minute. The OPEC nations do not include the US. That's correct. But that has nothing to do with the function of managing fees. And you're like, well, but wait a minute. Saudi Arabia has its own currency. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Venezuela has theirs. I think it's the Bolivar or something like that. Anyway, but here's the thing. Venezuela, which George Bush called one of the members of Axis of Evil or Axis of Terror, which has its own currency, which is suffering. Their people are starving and they're running out of the country into other countries looking for help. But they trade oil on the dollar. It's called the oil dollars or whatever they call it. So a country that hates America still trades on a dollar. And I explained why this is in chapter 1, because our currency is stable.
Yeah.
Our currency is stable. You do not want to trade on a currency that's all the way up and all the way down and all the way up and all the way, because nobody will work with you. No one will trade with you. It's like, wait a minute, yesterday I gave you $1 million for this much oil. Now you want 10 million. And then the following you want 1 million. They said, we can't do business with you because we never know how to budget for this. And then they go to yours and says, oh, nice and stable. So these are called oil dollars. So countries that absolutely can't stand our guts trade oil in the US dollar.
Yeah.
And those dollars and those fees are monitored by the New York Fed, and they go through banks in New York. Because remember I said, the city with the most banks in the world are New York and London.
Yeah.
So every one of these countries, including the baddies, they have a branch of their bank right here in New York City.
Wow.
So I mentioned to you before, international business and getting into that, and international banking is a very lucrative field to go in. On the surface, the big picture is not hard to understand once you understand who all the actors are and why we exist in the first place for them. But it comes down to trust, understanding math, and actually even in accounting is simple math, and passing some series licenses. And then you get in there. One of my dear friends, she's from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, lives in Singapore now, and it's one of the few women who work in energy trade. Her base salary is $500,000, and then she gets bonuses. Yeah, and she's considered a dear friend of mine. There are not a lot of women in this field, so there's tremendous opportunity in this space if you want to get into it. And almost every big bank does something in the energy space because there's just so much money in it. So something to keep in the back of your mind. And then, of course, there's the European Union, the EU. And I mentioned in the last class, and if you think about it, why did all these countries in Europe get together and create a common union? Now, I was born in England, and I can tell you when I was visiting my family, countries like countries like Germany and France, Germany and Switzerland, even though the World War II has been over, their grandparents told their children, and their children told their children. And when I was traveling, and I remember I was in Sweden, and I was coming, I had a friend of mine in California was from Hamburg, northern Germany, one of the largest seaports in the world. And I had met this dude, Christian, and I said, hey, look, I'm going to be in Hamburg. We should get together, and my friends, and we got together, and you could feel the tension. And these were the grandkids. So
Oh, yeah.
there is this tremendous cultural, it's kind of like the New York Yankee fans versus the Boston Red Sox fans. It's like, we can't kill you. But I promise you, coming from England, you go to a soccer match or what they call football, and Germany and England play, I promise you, a lot of people are getting stabbed. They're getting the crap kicked out of them. Everyone is drunk. They're throwing stuff at each other. And, it's not quite 100 years, but this war was a long time ago. And now you go to them and say, we're going to be one economic union. They fought like tooth and nail. All the business people recognized the opportunity, because what they realized was, the U.S. at the time was around just under 300 million people. So it was about the same numbers. If all these countries got together under one currency and under one economic union, then they could compete with the U.S. equal to equal, meaning that they could, if they needed to buy supplies from Canada for wood, instead of one country coming in and having to pay a higher price because the numbers going into the U.S. are higher, they could go in and get the same deal. If they wanted to get oil, they could get the same deal. So, and when they did business back and forth between the countries, whether olive oil coming out of Greece or wine coming out of France or something else coming out of Spain, etc., and the currencies are fluctuating all over the place, now they have one common currency. And so there's less volatility. And that's when the euro came about, and the euro is stable, kind of like the US dollar is stable. And so other countries want to do business with them, right? And so they also will park a lot of money into European banks. Now, of course, there's Brexit because of all this nationalism. So when the US has become so nationalistic with their politics, it's really weird, because Europe basically does the same thing. It's like sheep. Wherever the US goes, good or bad, Europe goes. And so, of course, England said, we're not going to be a part of the economic union because the sterling is strong, and we're going to stick with our the pound. And so England is the one that said, we can politically work with the European Union, but we're going to keep our own currency. And so England will trade with euros, but they have their own currency. The French franc, gone. The German, the French, I'm getting the currency. Anyway, the peso, the German currency, all of this stuff, they're gone. They all trade on, the currency of those nations is the euro. And the most powerful economy in Europe is actually not England, it's Germany, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's going on over there, and that's why it was formed, right?
The Deutschmark.
The Deutschmark. Thank you. After threats, nationalism, culture, infrastructure. All right. So let me cover a couple more things and then some more questions. So some of the things that help and actually hurt us, and I actually mentioned this in the last class, if McDonald's goes into another country, they have to be careful of cultural and nationalism. I can't sell pork sausages into Malaysia. I can't sell beef. I can sell all this stuff, but nobody's going to buy it into India. There's certain things you can and can't do in different countries. So the point is, you've got to be aware of threats and opportunities. Some of them are not like trying to be violent. It's just that you have to be aware of cultural and nationalism in these other countries when you do business. There are also multinational companies that at times prop up economies, but also create problems. For instance, are you aware that the annual sales of a company like Walmart and Exxon are greater, like just Walmart alone, are greater than some countries' GDP? There are countries that their entire GDP of the country is smaller than the amount of money Walmart makes in a year or Exxon makes in a year. So imagine as a company going into those countries will cave into those kind of companies, and will do things as those companies want because they have so much financial power. And if those countries decide to say, well, we're going to be punitive, we're going to put tariffs, we're going to fine you, we're going to sue you or whatever, it's like, then we won't do business in you. And they're like, oh, okay. So there's fears of multinational companies in some countries because of the power they have. And so some countries that you can tell do not have fear, and you can see that they don't like it. For instance, Germany has fined Google multiple times saying, you don't have the same access to private information that you do in the US. And so Germany has fined Alphabet / Google multiple times because of that. Exxon and oil companies, the problem with oil drums is what do you do with them after you finish with them? These companies will regularly go out to the middle of international waters and drop these oil drums into the middle of the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. And of course, that affects sea life and it harms the environment and stuff. And they get fined. And the company's like, you know what? The cost of having to process those oil drums compared to the cost of the fine's cheaper, we'll pay the fine. So large multinational companies build up economies, but they also pose at sometimes a threat to economies, right? And depending on what country we're talking about, sometimes there's not much they can do about it. And that's where GATT comes in, and that's where meetings at the General Assembly of the UN come in, and international organizations to put pressure on these companies to do the right thing. Okay, and that leads to companies. Well, philanthropy we already talked about in the ethics chapter, so I'm not going to cover that again. And then is a company's only responsibility to invest as a profit? Why not? No, I just answered that. It's also, do you, if I go ahead to work. Yeah, okay, Amber. So let me do this. Let me take the class picture because I didn't realize the time. Let's take the attendance picture. So, yeah, there's the Eurozone, by the way. All these slides you already have, by the way. So if we can turn on the images, I'll take the attendance picture. So in case people have to go. All right, so yeah, so today's I'm gonna use a squeezable light bulb. Believe it or not, I got it in the Lawrence Field Center for Entrepreneurship over at Baruch. So
that's cool.
You guys realize that if you want to start a business and you need help from the Small Business Administration, that it's free. Martin is presenting us a surplus pencil that he got from Thailand when they dumped on the U.S. market. He's got one of the rare pencils, but it's free, and the SBA will help anyone because you pay for it in your taxes. At Baruch, Columbia, and Pace, they all have offices, and you can literally walk onto those campuses and use their services for free because your tax money paying into Small Business Administration pays for that. So Anna is that Vaseline? Okay, so that's for chapped knees. And Anthony Pringles, you're making me hungry. John's trying to stay awake. He's got his
Always.
energy. Harlan has his charger. Jenny has, I don't know what that is. Is that a beer?
They're mooncakes.
Oh, mooncakes. I'm so jealous. And Giselle has Snapple. And Nicole has that beautiful thing on the wall. Ryan has his brick wall. Adiana, what is that? The remote control? And Christina, yours is blurry. Is that yogurt? So, and okay, Ashley, Quinn, Matthew, Brian, Ambra, Yami, Anita, Jaquan. I'm ready to take the picture. So, all right, let me frame it. Hold on. Let me frame it. Quinn, I can't believe you're not here. Matthew, Brian, Ambra, Anita, Yami. Okay, here we go. Okay, this thing is so small. Here we go. So on 3, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, I got it. Let's see if I can save it. Because I remember one class, I had a problem with this. And I have too many things open. Oh, come on, don't take so long. Okay, 1 second, let's make sure I got it.
Hey, we don't have class Monday, right?
Oh, is there another holiday that I wasn't aware of?
I think so.
Oh my God. You know, in California, we didn't have as many holidays.
No kidding.
No, especially the religious ones. There's some religious holidays I never even heard of until I moved to New
Yeah,
York.
I think it's Yom Kippur.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned it because I wasn't even aware of it. All right, Ambra, I understand. So let me see. I think I covered all of this because that was the extra union. Oh, the social responsibility. I actually covered this in the ethics class when I talked about giving, but in a way that actually helps.
It was one of the homework questions.
Oh, okay. Something
Yeah.
on. Oh, here it is. Christina popped in and out. All right. So I covered that. Company can. Oh, this is the last thing. Remember, I said entering trade from the least risky to the most risky. What's the least risky way to do it? So I know we're out of time, so let me just cover it. The least. Let's say you have a ski shop and it's in Seattle, Washington. And actually, I'm using that as an example because I actually know of a company called Evo, which is like environmental. And their skis are really cool and unique. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's some cool places to ski that you may not be aware of. Like you can literally ski in Maui in Hawaii because there's a mountain over 25,000 feet up. You can ski in Osaka, Japan, and it's some of the best snow you can ski on. Well, what I want my skis to go into those locations, especially in Japan. Well, the first thing I might do is set up a website and people order it, and then they send the payment in, and then the skis get shipped over, so they get it in 1 to 2 weeks. Well, that's low risk for me because I don't have to put a lot of money into it. I only ship the skis when I get paid for it, so that's the least risky way to do it. The next thing would be the license. So maybe there's a company there that sells skis, and I'm gonna sell maybe $10,000 worth of skis out of their shop, and I license them to do it. Like they have to present it a certain way, whatever the waxing for the ski. They have all these things that goes with it, and they have to do it the way I like it, right? We think about restaurants, franchising is licensing. So McDonald's forces you to put the sign a certain way. You have to prepare the burgers a certain way. There's all of these special things processing wise that you have to do. So licensing is the next way. And now it's a little less risky, more risky because I just outlaid some money. I gave some skis or I gave control of my process, my restaurant and my brand that you might screw up or something like that and misrepresent me that can cause blowback into my company. Think of Nike licensing organizations to make the sneakers and then people finding out that these kids are making $5 a day, or in China at Foxconn, people diving out the window and killing themselves because they're under such harsh conditions, and to the point where they put nets to catch them. So there are additional risks there. The next thing I could do is create a joint venture or a JV, right? So a JV is, so Yami has a company, I have a company, and we create a separate company together. So we come together jointly into a venture or a business, and we sell our products that way. So you could have access to the market, like with sales organizations, and I could have access to the product. And we come together, create a company that sells product, do that. Or maybe you sell a particular product that goes well with mine. What if you sell computers and I sell software? And we decide to come together to create a service organization that uses the software and the computers, like a consulting firm or something like that. The good thing is you put skin in the game, I put skin in the game, and that's how I mitigate my risk and also make sure that you do what you're going to do and I'm going to do what I do. Again, the risk is I invested in it and I can lose my investment. The other risk is, what if we get into a disagreement? You could pull out and create a lot of problems for me. Now, I may be able to put some really harsh contracts in place that force you to have to deal with what we agreed to or not. But then I have to spend money on that too, and I have legal issues and I have to travel a lot. The next one is to create, I could buy the company. I could buy the company in Japan that already makes skis and then start producing mine. Well, now we're talking millions and millions of dollars. Now, the good news is I have greater control of the market, where I had a joint venture, or a licensing agreement. That company who sold skis was never going to give me access to their customer list, right? In the case where I own the company, I have control of that list. So therefore, I have greater control of the market. And because the other thing with the licensing company, what if they decide to reverse engineer my skis? Now I've lost everything, because they know my skis, they know the market, they know how to sell it. What do they need me for, right? And then the last one in that line is to do what they call evergreen. Evergreen is I go out to a field where there's nothing but green grass and I build it from the ground up. Now we're talking even more money, because when I bought the company, it existed. Now I have to build the company. I have to educate the market. It's going to cost me more money and take me longer. GE went into India, built a $300 million nuclear reactor, a plant to create energy, clean, free energy to the country. They changed to a new president. The president said, we don't believe in nuclear. GE says, well, then give us back the $300 million. And India says, go screw yourself. We're going to nationalize it. We own it. And GE lost $300 million over one election. So the risk is much, much higher, especially when you're going into another country. And then the new thing is strategic alliance. And strategic alliances, I go to Anita, I go to Christina, I go to Matthew, I go to John, and I say, I have this business and I'm looking for a partner. And I'm not going to get into a long-term contract. We'll learn in accounting that long-term is defined by 1 year. Short-term is anything under a year. I'm going to get into a short-term contract with you. You do your part, I do my part. If you don't, well, I can move on from you to the next one. And now what I'm doing is I'm having businesses compete the lowest bid with the best quality. I say, I want the low. I want you to offer me the best pricing low, but I also want the best quality, and I want the product on time, right? On time, on budget. Now what's happening is I'm forcing innovation, I'm forcing efficiencies, I'm forcing productivity, etc. And that's what I did with my company. I opened up. I had a business in telecommunications with software through the internet, and my developer was in England, but I was very familiar with the Southeast Asian market. And I went to a bunch of different businesses around the Philippines. I understand Ariana. I went to the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand. I'm missing one of the countries. Anyway, and I found partners in each place. And I said, I will provide the software. You provide the marketing, the sales, and the legal and the banking coverage. In other words, I don't need to fly 18 hours every time there's a problem or deal with a banker, or deal with a lawyer or stuff like that. You deal with it. And once the money came into the commercial bank account, I would release 10,000 licenses of the software, and I could literally do it with a keystroke on my computer. And they were happy and I was happy, and it worked out really well. That's a strategic alliance, right? That's where I got to do my part, they got to do their part, but we don't get locked into these long contracts where people like, think about athletes. Soon as the quarterback gets $200 million, all of a sudden the production starts going down. Or baseball player, or basketball player. All of a sudden, they're not playing as hard as they used to. Now we all play just as hard as when we first started. That's a strategic alliance. And those are the ways that you get into international business, and that's kind of the order. And this is an interesting list. Like, you can't shake hands with someone from a Muslim country, Islamic country with your left hand, because that's the hand they use to clean their butt. You can't show the bottom of your foot in northern Thailand because it's considered insulting. Like, there's cultural do's and don'ts in different countries. In Japan, you have to sit down and drink tea and build a relationship before you close business, right? So, and then here's where, notice the United States is down here, right? Gross national income. So per individual, here's Luxembourg. Remember I told you in Switzerland, you can make 60 grand just serving food? These countries, you can make a lot more money per individual. The US is not the top of the heap. It's not by a long shot, right? You can make more money in other countries. So anyway, we already talked about GDP, which used to be called gross national income. It's the same. See, GDP, gross domestic product. It's the same thing. We talked about politics, culture. These are some of the large companies. So this is, remember, you have to add million to this. So this is $482 billion, right? And this is where the companies are located. Notice they're not all American companies. A lot of them are oil companies, energy, because there's a lot of money. But there's a lot of countries that don't produce almost $500 billion in gross domestic product. So these companies have incredible power and control in other countries. Right, multinationals, they're in more than one nation. Right. So, and the big trend, of course, is AI and the internet. Right. Through the internet, I created an international business without having to spend more than $5,000. Right. So, and more markets are opening up. The earth is becoming flatter economically. Manufacturing floors are popping up, and social trends. So those of you who, in your 20, I think we have some teenagers here, but 17 through 39, you kind of think the same when it comes to keep the planet clean, treat people fairly, and yet I still want to make a profit. And the younger range is also saying, I want a job to make money. It's almost like athletes. I'm prepared to do my one and done and get to work in the business world and things like that. So but if you go to other countries, it's similar. And why? Because the internet, because of Twitter/X, because of social media, because of concerts, people are now traveling back and forth very easily. And so they're starting to engage with one another and beginning to think very similarly. They still are proud of their nations. They fight for their country. They cheer on their teams. But young people are starting to think more and more similarly, like low calorie, good lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, all these kind of things. And so companies are not having to, there's language barriers, but they're not having to create things so uniquely different from one place to the next. This creates opportunity. This creates the opportunity, right? So new technology, the use of the internet, and the fact that the world is becoming closer and closer and closer, right? You see more and more of this. And I absolutely encourage all of you, get on an airplane and go someplace. Like, do not stay in one city, one state, one country. Go someplace.
Still in
Go some-
Cayman,
Say it again.
still in the Cayman Islands.
I know you used to, right? But go someplace. This everybody should go someplace. You know, especially while you're young, before you start families and all this stuff. Get on a plane and go someplace. Go take a semester abroad. Go to Scandinavia. Go to Australia. They speak English anyway, right?
Sure.
Go to Canada. I mean, people forget that Canada is another country. Go to Canada.
Is
know,
it though?
What do you mean? Is it though? Right, 55
That was
kilometers
just-
an hour
Yeah.
is not the same as 55 miles an hour, and
Yeah.
you know, it's just get on a plane, go someplace, go someplace, go to a place where you don't know the culture, you don't know the language, you don't mean. In 2021, I went to Western Africa to Tanzania, or as they say, Tanzania, and I went to Zimbabwe, to where who's the guy from Queen, the music group?
Oh, Freddie Mercury?
Freddie Mercury is from Zanzibar, and I was staying one block from where his home was.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, amazing. The spices, the food, the culture, the people.
Yeah, Africa's interesting.
I mean, go, guys, get on a plane and go someplace. Don't be afraid to travel. All right. So I'll check, but I mean, I'm going to take you guys' word for it. But if we don't have class Monday, I won't see you. I will send you out some announcements. Please be diligent to read them, because remember, the first exam is going to go open up after I release homework 3. I'll probably open it up this week. And knowing that we don't have class Monday, I may delay it a little bit longer so you can take advantage of your Monday day off or whatever. And I will send out some instructions to start to prepare for your final project, right? So lots of stuff coming down the pike. So finish the chapters, finish the homeworks, get ready for the exam, and then get ready for your final project. Okay, so we have a lot going on in a short amount of time, and then we'll get back into the next thing, which is finance and accounting, then exam, and then marketing, then
And
exam,
marketing, yeah.
and then finish off the semester. So, you know, we're gonna go through these periods of, and then jam, and then jam, and then jam, like that, right? So we're
Sounds good.
coming up. So don't let anything slip. All right.
You got it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the extra time. I will talk to you later. If you need to
Hey,
talk,
Professor.
I will stay online.
All right,
Okay.
Professor. Have a good one, everybody.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your vacation with your wife.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I see your face has got a little bit of color up here on the
A
forehead.
little bit, yeah. It's a little burnt, but I'm okay.
All right. Be careful.
I'll see you soon, okay?
All right. We'll do.
All right, bye.
All right. So Christina,
Bye.
I'll hang out, Christina. So bye, Ashley. Thank you for showing up. And
Of course.
so there's Ashley and then Christina. So I don't have to use a breakout room. So Christina, I think it's just you and me.
Yeah, so I was trying to do homework 3, but it wasn't opened up to me.
Because no one has it. Remember, I don't open it until I finish teaching the chapter.
Oh, I moved ahead then, because I was starting the Apple discussion.
We don't do
The
that until we cover finance and accounting.
Okay. So I went ahead. I started like reading and doing a bunch of stuff to catch up.
No, I
So,
appreciate it.
So I had one question. The SBA that you were talking about, right? I'm trying to do a trucking business, but I keep getting denied for an SBA loan.
Oh, SBA, small business. Okay, so tell me exactly what you're trying to do, and I'll tell you if you're going in the right place or in the right direction. What
So
are you
I was
trying to do?
I was trying to do like a trucking business, where we haul products from state to state.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I don't know, they just like they said they don't do certain things. I don't know.
So I need a little bit more detail. So are you hauling like
Just
heavy-
regular packages and from store to store. It's just random stuff. but it's not like hazardous material. It's like,
Right, that's what I was getting at, because they're gonna have different requirements, like if you're carrying oil or gas.
yeah,
or-
we're not doing any of that.
So like household goods,
Yeah, pretty
furniture,
much.
cars.
Exactly.
Okay, so some of that stuff may still have certain requirements to carry from one state to the next.
Mhm.
Some of them kind of like moving companies, like somebody moves from the state of New York to, say, Maryland, right? There's those kind of companies. And then there are those who get into business, like, let's say Walmart is shipping stuff from one state to the next, and you get into a contract with Walmart, you can go in as a minority vendor because you're female, and I can't see your face, but and I can't see your last name on the screen. Are you
Oh, I'm a Hispanic.
right? So you're a double minority, and so especially after George Floyd, a lot of companies are looking to do business with minority um, uh, um, partners and business people. So I need more specific, because if you're looking to do something with a business to business, that's different than from consumer to do to transport things for consumers, like a moving company does. Like the New York is a horrible place to try to get into it now, because they're trying to kill each other. The piece of cake used to be tiny, now they're big, and all these companies
Yeah.
fighting over each other. And there's strategy around that, because I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually buy one of the storage companies, because then they can use it for financial leverage. But so depending on who your customers are, like
Yeah.
if it's Walmart to Walmart, that's a great business to be in. You can even do it for the government, because let's say it's not something like munitions, the words bullets, and it's not hazardous material, but you could be moving stationery for the Department of the Navy, or clothes for the Department of Army, and get into a 5 to 10 year contract guaranteed for like a couple of $1 million, and just need to have a couple of trucks. And they say, look, the Navy's in Annapolis.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to
But
purchase.
that's what I mean.
trucks.
You need to be specific, because you can't say random. Random is gonna, people are like, I don't know what you want.
So
You
it's
gotta
like goods and services, like household goods, like you said before, furniture,
But
stuff
who are
like
your
that.
customers? Who are your customers?
So I was doing it from business to business, not a customer kind of
Well, that
thing.
is a customer. So your customers are business to business, as opposed to consumer to wherever they need to go, right? So,
Yeah.
right. So you gotta. If I were you, I would write a business plan. And even if you have to write more than one, because you may say, well, I'd be interested in a government contract, and I'm interested in a business contract. Write two of them, and be very, very specific. Don't be general, right? Businesses don't like, well, I could do anything. You're going to lose. I can do random. You're going to lose. The bank won't give you money. The SBA won't support you. You've got to be specific. I said, I want to start out with 2 trucks. Why 2? Because one may break. So they always like to see that. And like one of my students is from Dominican Republic, and she's 22, and she has I think she has 5 different locations around Brooklyn, where she bought the real estate and then brought grocery store and some of these other businesses into it. And it's kind of like a hair shop. They pay the money to lease out her space, and then the bank likes it because she can show the revenue coming in, and so they give her a very low interest rate. On the mortgage for those places. And so she's growing her business by doing that. That's her thing, right? She appears to be a grocer, but really she's a real estate company. So she's very clear and specific, and she's only 22 years old, and she still has a very heavy Dominican accent. So here's somebody who hasn't been here long, who basically said, this is what I want to do. And then she got her family to pony up some money for the first piece of real estate, and then she used that as leverage, and on and on. So you go in and say, I'm going to start a trucking business. And let's say I want to work for a company like Lowe's, Home Depot, and Walmart, etc. And I want to move merchandise from here to here, and I want to go in as a minority contractor. Sometimes minorities say I don't want it because there's a lot of paperwork involved. But if you do,
Right.
if you do that, then you go in and say, they said we want to fulfill our like we have agreed to do X amount of business with minority contractors because you would be a contractor, and as a result, we get a tax break. And you go in and say, and they're going to say, well, you know, what happens in 3 months and 6 months when you fail? Because remember, you're a risk. As soon as you walk in the door, I don't care if you're rich or not, you're a risk. In other words, what if you crash? What if you lose it? What if the stuff is stolen? Are you insured? You always have to think, I have to mitigate or minimize what they perceive to be a risk, right? So
Right.
it's always good to have a second person. You should incorporate, because if you get sued or bankrupt, you don't want to bankrupt your social security number. You want to bankrupt your federal tax ID, right? That's how rich people stay rich, because when they go bankrupt, they don't individually, personally go bankrupt. Their company goes bankrupt. And Donald Trump has bankrupt his companies over and over and over. And
Yeah, I know.
so
Times it's ridiculous. I'm surprised he's
well, forget about ridiculous in politics. We need to keep your mind focused on business. So you need to write a business plan, maybe one for the government, and I would go into the GSA schedule to find out what contracts are there. And keep this in mind. The government shuts down in September. If you work for the government, you can't take vacation in September and October. What's the point, Ian? The point is, if Christina contacts the GSA schedule for the government, you won't get a response, because right now they're closing the books because we're in the month of September. In October, especially into November, all the new budgets come in. The GSA schedule suddenly gets reset up. All the congressmen and et cetera, people like that said, we need your tax money to do X, Y, Z, are suddenly going to populate, and there's going to be $100 billion worth of contracts into the GSA schedule. And thanks to Obama, before him, you actually had to read through books and material. He says, this is stupid, let's put it online. So you could literally go online and look at it. There will be something as squirrely as, we need somebody who's Native American in the state of Alaska, between 20 and 30 years old, who can work in XYZ as a janitor in a military facility. Or something as broad as, we need anybody who can deliver uniforms. Like, there'll be very specific things like building a helicopter, and then there'll be something as mundane as it's delivering food. And somewhere there'll be things for women or minorities or double. And remember, by law and the federal side, right? By law, they have to first vet, means to go through the process of checking each one out before they finally make a decision. So they have to vet out Native American and Alaskan female, Native American, Alaskan male. And then I don't know if Black goes first and then Asian and then Chinese or what, but they have to do in that order before they get to white female, white male. And the problem is they can never find enough people in those categories. So legally, if you can satisfy the requirement because you're female and because you're a Latina, and even if you get in business, let's say with your brother, your dad, or whoever, you should always be 51% control, because that means you are a female Latina business. If you go 50-50 or 49-50 and the other person's a male, you didn't slip down a rung. And if you do that, let's say you're doing it with like a husband or a boyfriend and he's white male and you make him 51% on him, you are way down the bottom of that rung. So this is why you got to understand what the requirements are. So when you put a business plan together and you say, I'm the only one, that's kind of risky, because the language literally is, what happens when Christina gets run over by a bus? Now who's going to take care of us? So we're going to look at small business in towards the end of the semester and entrepreneurship. But you have to look always at yourself. You know, forget about all the rhetoric and the politics and drama. I don't care about that. You got to look at it, be black and white from a business standpoint and say, I want to run a business as a female, a Latina.
Yeah.
Comes to if you're looking for set aside contracts. So for instance, I don't know, it's back in the closet, but I have a business called Nikon. I took my first name and flipped it. So instead of Ian Communications, it's Nikon. Like Oprah's company is Harpo. She took her first name and flipped it around. So Harpo is the reverse of Oprah. Diana Ross has a business in Astoria, Queens called Anade Studios, which is she took Diana. So whatever, you come up with a name. Like maybe your company is
I have a name.
whatever,
Because I have a
whatever it
I
is.
have
My point is you need to register your company. Most likely you should do it as an LLC, limited liability corporation. It gives you
that's what I did.
you don't
That's
want
what
to
I
do
did.
C corp, you don't want to do S corp, and you really don't want to do it under your social security number if you're going to get in the contracts. Matter of fact, they probably won't do business with you if you do that because you present a risk that you could go bankrupt. So if you set up as a limited liability corporation, you could do it in the state of New York, you could do it in Delaware, you can pick states where the state business tax is low, whatever. I actually just did mine in New York. And not just now in terms of time, but 20 years ago, I set it up in New York. I actually have 2 businesses. But if you decide that I want to do a business plan as just an individual, has nothing to do with being female or Latina. I want to do a business plan so that I could apply to a company like Walmart, Amazon, which does a lot of deliveries, etc. Matter of fact, one of my cousins got married to a Native American female. They moved to North Carolina, and they actually opened up a Federal Express franchise. They actually do all the shipping of FedEx in their territory. And of course, he put his wife as the 51% because she's Native American and she's female. So when FedEx goes in and says, we have diversity in our organization, and therefore we get tax breaks because here's one of our business that supplies in this area. So they went out,
Right.
they leased all the trucks, they hired all the people, and these people deliver all the packages for FedEx in their area of North Carolina. And that's what they do. That's their business, right? So they were very clear about what they wanted to do and how they're going to do it. And because she's from a reservation, she got monies from the reservation to actually, she got a very low interest loan from the reservation to actually put the money into, opening an office, because you also have to be able to hold boxes and stuff and park those trucks on and then lease all those trucks. And that's how they got started. And the companies with the trucks says, oh yeah, you're well-funded, you're incorporated as an LLC, you are a minority contractor. When can we sign up? Let's do this. They were laser focused. Did what they want. They figured out what they want to do. So you need to be as laser focused. And I would look at it as forget about being Latina female. I'm just a business person. Then also look at it as a Latina female working with a company like they did FedEx. You may look at FedEx, Walmart, whoever, I don't care, whatever it is. And also for government, because government is very different. You hear when I talk to John, the rules are very different on the government side. I would look at each one of these organizations, well, in regular business, you look at what are the business requirements, whether it's licenses, insurance, because you're dealing with people's stuff. And so you're going to have to be insured. And you're going to need minimum 2 trucks, because if one breaks, right, and then you have to find places to service and take care of it. Do you own it or do you lease it, right? Because if you lease it, when something happens, it's not your headache. You give it back, they give you a new one. If you own it, you got to take care of it. And
that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna lease trucks because I didn't want the mechanic side in the beginning of our business. And I thought leasing it would cut a lot of cost, because even if something happens to the truck, they'll replace it with no issue.
So it's not, so the cost is an issue. I agree. But but I need you to put your brain in the side of, especially if you're dealing with like a Walmart or a FedEx or one of the agencies of the U.S. government.
Right.
They're also looking at it as you agreed to deliver this stuff on this particular. You agreed to pick this stuff up this day and deliver it this day. Coming back and
Right.
saying, "Oh, the truck broke down."
Yeah, they don't.
At that point, it's not about cost. It's about we can't do business with you because you don't.
Yeah, my reliability, like they can't rely
Exactly.
on it.
Exactly. And that's when you look at the leasing and say, oh, we're good because I'm working with the Acme company over here that leases trucks out. And so, and in the terms, you even say, you know, we have a 24-hour, they have a 24-hour policy that if the truck breaks down, they replace it in 24 hours. And so, and then you look and say, is that competitive? And if the others are 24 or longer, you're competitive. Like no one's going to look. We live in New York, and if your business is in New York, we're going to have a snowstorm. And so, if the truck breaks down or something like that, no one's going to deliver a truck in 1 hour, right? And if they do, God bless them, great for that. But so you also want to build in so that remember. Here's the thing you should remember: under promise, over deliver. Under promise, over deliver. I could get it to you in 24 hours and then show up an hour later. And they're like, oh my God, well, how'd she make it? We don't care and we don't know how she did it. But this woman always is like there.
On time. Yeah.
She under promise, over deliver.
Under promise, over deliver. I like that. Okay.
But don't say I'll get it to you in a year. That's not under promise, and that's being an
Yeah,
idiot.
that's
Right?
ridiculous.
Right. So you got to figure out. And here's the thing: if I ask you, what's the right amount of time? You don't know the answer. You know who knows the answer? Every other business is doing the same delivery. So if every other business is doing it 48 hours, what you're saying to your staff is, whatever we do, we have to be no longer than a day and a half, preferably 24 hours. Because then you go in and say, I can get it to you in 24 hours, 48 hours. And then you wind up showing up in 24. And they like, you know what? They always deliver on time. They're always ahead of time. They're always courteous, right? There's no irregularity around pricing. And there's no excuses, no complaints. They're professional. Nothing's damaged, etc. That's what you want because remember, nobody has. It's just like when you go date a guy, right? Mm-hmm. You like to think you can trust him, but everybody's on a 3-month evaluation period. Well, guess what? Now you're dealing with people's money. You better believe you're on an evaluation period, unless you know the owner of the companies, your father, your uncle, whatever. And I would actually start that way because at least you can start building up your muscle because you're going to make a boatload of mistakes. And because you're a young female and you're new in business, there's a certain amount of grace. They're going to get like a straight up New Yorker, like, I'm not sure I could do business with you, which is secret language for you get another chance. But they can't come and say, we'll give you another chance. It's not the South where they say, I understand, honey. We'll be all right. Let's go drink some sweet tea and we'll figure it all out. No, New York is like F you in the morning, F you in the afternoon, and F you in the evening. And that's translated in other parts of the United States of good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Right.
Yeah.
So the language in New York means the same, but it's stated differently. But underneath it, you got to understand, you only get so many breaks, breaks, because they know you're going to make some mistakes. They know it. They're going to say she's green behind, she's wet behind the ears and green around the mouth. In other words, she's so new, she doesn't know she has no shoes on, right? So you got to expect that. And what I do is not expect just because you emotionally are setting up your tough skin. You got to set your business up for that. So when they say, like, let's say that they can't give you a truck, you better already have plan B in place. Like, here's the Uber number, or here's, I can go rent the truck. It costs me a little bit more, but I'm going to deliver no matter what. Like C&C Rentals is the best, it's the cheapest delivery in New York, but they got no suspension in the trucks. And they probably been hit more times than you can count. But they got space, they got seats, they got an engine, they got 4 wheels, and they work. So you're like, here's my plan A with, you know, the leasing company that replaces it. And if all else fails, I got a relationship with CNC Rental, and then I got Uber, and then I got my uncle Charlie over here who's got a truck. All of that needs to be lined up because they don't want to hear one lousy excuse.
Right.
An excuse means I don't want to do business with you. That's what excuse equals. I don't want to do business with you.
Yeah, because
I want you to remember something else. PI. You know what PI stands for? I learned this at IBM.
what?
Performance, image, exposure. Performance is the quality, right?
Right.
Image is your brand. Exposure is getting the brand or the name of your business out there so people hear about you. My question is, which is most important? Performance, image, or performance, image, or exposure? Which one is the most important?
I believe image.
Exposure.
Well, I mean, you can have the exposure, but if your image is trifling.
Christina, I know you like to argue with me all the time, and I know
Oh,
you.
no.
I know it comes. I know
Okay.
it comes from a good place. I know it comes from a good place.
That was actually a question. That wasn't me arguing. I was gonna ask a question
Christina, I
to
need
get
you
a better understanding.
I need you to be less sensitive, because sometimes I'm going to test you and push you, and if I'm testing you and pushing you, imagine what you're going to do when you're them. What I'm saying is when I went to IBM, I thought it was performance because I thought if you don't have quality, then why would people buy it? I'll give you another example. You go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
There's the famous Michelin guide, right? It's more famous than Yelp. It's been around longer, etc. And it's 5 stars. 5 stars is the top. Like you don't want to be a 1-star restaurant and be in the Michelin guide in French. Nobody's coming to your restaurant. Matter of fact, you'd rather not be listed at that point. When you and your boyfriend or husband or whatever your situation is, go to a nice restaurant on a date and sit and they sit you down after the concierge meets you at the door. What is and you sit down at a table, what is the first thing they do?
They greet you.
That was already at the door.
When you sit down at the table,
yes,
the waiter greets you and asks you for to drink.
No.
What do you mean no?
No means no.
Okay. So what is it?
They pick up the extra place settings. Every single good quality restaurant, you sit down, there's 4 sides to the table. They pick them up. We'll be right back. And then they come over. And, of course, they say, hi, thank you, welcome here, blah, blah, blah. They pick it up. I'll be right back. And then they come back and they say, is there something, they immediately start to pour water. And then they ask you, is there something you'd like to drink? And then they come back and say, let me tell you what the specials are. And here's our menu. Take your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. In a restaurant, you would think the food is most important. It's the quality of the service is the most important. It's pie. And so the Michelin guide is exposure. When you go to a store in New York, and it's not true in all states, they have, for something that's large, a franchise, they have to put the calorie count and those letters that say A, B, and whatever. So the further down you go, the more rats you see running around. And me and friends of mine, we don't go anything less than maybe we're going to B, but we're looking for A's. That's exposure. When you look at the Yelp guide, that's exposure. And then when you get there, that brand, that image, it's like, oh yeah. Or when you see Starbucks and you're in another country, it's like, I'm enjoying myself, but I just need a little taste of America and I'll be good to go. Right? The brand means brand equals trust. That's what brand is. That's all it is. Now, understand this. If I go stay in a low-end Fairfield Inn, which is owned by Marriott, but Marriott also owns Ritz-Carlton. Guess what? I trust the Fairfield Inn is going to give me what the Fairfield Inn is going to give me. I trust that the Ritz-Carlton is going to give me what the Ritz-Carlton is. So trust and doesn't mean that it's going to be the best. It just means that I know what I'm going to get. So when you establish your brand and the exposure brings the person in, and that's your image, and whatever you do, it's consistently the same. They say, I trust that I know what I'm going to get from this business. If you can't deliver the quality, the performance, they ain't never coming back, ever. But here's the good news. Let's say you make a mistake. Let me give you an example. In the 70s, this woman, single mother with a child, goes to Kentucky Fried Chicken. Back then they called it Kentucky Fried Chicken. Of course, today they call it KFC. Are you there? Hello? Christina?
I don't know what happened. You just broke up.
I know all of a sudden you were going, anyway.
Hello?
So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
All right,
you now.
so
Go ahead.
single mother, right? A
Mhm.
woman with a child walks into Kentucky Fried Chicken, orders a bucket, goes home, sits down, and just as she's about to eat, starts screaming, "Ah!" and reaches for her son and snatches the food out of her son's mouth and rushes him to the hospital. As her son is eating, she could see the tail hanging out of his mouth. A rat had fallen into the fry vat, and his son was about to eat the fried rat. Kid's fine, mother's fine, the company pays a whole lot of money. My point is, their performance was bad. But Kentucky Fried Chicken never lost a beat. It was publicized everywhere. Kentucky Fried Chicken became KFC, and KFC is now owned by Yum Yum Brands out of China, and they're making lots and lots of money selling food that nobody should eat anyway. My point is, the brand is so important that it carried over the mistake. What I'm teaching you right now is, yeah, you want to perform well. You don't want to overperform, because you create a new set of expectations, and you don't want to go over and under and over and under, because then your brand is that you're wishy-washy. Some days is good, some days is bad. And that's why some businesses say, we don't want to be the best, we just want to be very good or good. The best businesses charge a lot of money because they have to maintain. The Ritz-Carlton gives the woman who cleans the room $2,400. This is true. I've stayed at the Ritz-Carlton. When you walk into a Ritz-Carlton, other hotels, even competitors, and Ritz-Carlton allows this, will come in to learn how to provide service in a hotel from the Ritz-Carlton. When you check into a Ritz-Carlton, the very next time you come back in the door, they know your name. They are required to know that there could be 1,000 guests. I walk in there the first time, it's like, can I help you? Oh, thank you for coming, Mr. Howe. And how do you prefer Mr. Howe or Ian? Okay, blah, blah, blah. I walk back in after my business day. Oh, hi, Mr. Howe. I go to my room and it's not made up. The woman cleaning up who's busy at the end of the hall comes over. Oh my God, we can't have this. The room's on us tonight. She has the power to pay for that room that night. That's how much but they charge a hell of a lot of money, right?
Right.
But there's a lot more businesses in the very good range that will always try to exceed that, but not too much. Because even though you think a lot more is a great thing, it's not. Because now what you're seeing is you've created confusion in the customer and consumer's mind because they don't know what your brand is. You're not. This is why I'm saying you need to be clear about what you're saying. So exposure is your Yelp or Michelin guide. Image is that brand that people begin to know who you are and trust. And performance is a must, but you got to figure out what level of performance can you give. Remember, under promise, over deliver. Do not go and say, I'm going to be there exactly at the same time every single time and then miss it by a few minutes each time, but charge at that price. You'll lose them because they're like, you're too confusing. We don't know what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
So you may say, you know what? I'm going to start it as a good business. And then after 5 years, I'm gonna become a very good business. And after 5 more years, I'm gonna stay there because I do want to change my brand because now they know who I am. And every
Yeah.
time it talks about me, I'm going to be exposed into the marketplace as a very good brand that delivers this kind of stuff. And sometimes people say, look, I deliver, maybe you get a contract with Marriott and all you deliver are mattresses and bed sheets and stuff that goes in the room. And you're like, they say, oh, we need some money to deliver this. And it's a lot more money. I said, that's great, but that's not my brand. This is who I am. Everybody knows it. Everybody wants me. I'm gonna grow my. This is what you gotta figure out who you are. Now,
Right.
now, because I'm an educator, I get to ask this question. If I was a company hiring you, it's illegal. How old are you?
Oh, you're asking me like now. Oh,
Yeah, how
30.
old are you, Christina? I'm an educator. I'm not hiring you, so I'm not breaking the laws. You know, if you were like,
Yeah.
if you were
Go ahead.
70, you'd be like, oh, you discriminate because I'm 70. I can't hire you, so it doesn't matter. I'm asking for a reason. How old are you, Christina?
33.
33. So here's the thing. When each age group, there's expectations about, there are, businesses have certain levels of expectation. And this isn't
Right.
about right or wrong. This isn't about prejudice or anything. This is about black and white. It is what it is. So at 33, the expectation is that you are knowledgeable and that you should already know what business you want to be in. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's right at all. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just telling you that's what it is. So here's the thing. It used to be, so do you know when the adult mind is finished forming? What age?
I believe it's like 23 or something like that.
So if you don't know something, Christine, you should always say, I don't know. So it's between 25 and 26. The anatomy of your brain stops forming.
Right.
When companies would hire a 21, 22-year-old college graduate, and the college graduate said, I'm not sure what I wanted to do, but I really like this field. They're allowed to change their mind. And they used to be allowed to change their mind up to about 26 or 27 because they understood that the person's still adjusting and forming. So that's why when you look at a young person who's 12, 13, 16, and they keep changing their mind, and social scientists and psychologists don't seem to be put off by it because their brain is literally still forming. So how long does it take to become a master at anything? I don't care if it's playing games, doing math, becoming a really good chef, sewing clothes, sports. How long?
A long time. You can't just master something.
Christina?
Yeah.
It's not with the generalities. Do you know how long it takes?
It never. It doesn't have a time limit.
Yes, it's Christina. You're arguing with me. I wouldn't ask if I didn't know the answer.
Right.
Do you know
So
the
what's
answer?
the answer?
Okay. No, it's like, I don't know. You've got to get into the practice of saying, I don't know. It's a good thing to say. I realize.
But you're asking me a question, so it doesn't. It's not a bad
because
thing.
because I don't know if you know the answer, and so it's better for me not to assume. But in order for me to find out if you know, I have to ask. So I suspect that you are the oldest and firstborn female in your family, right? And so I can tell. So it's 5 years. There's this thing called 10,000 hours to master something, and 10,000 hours equals 5 years. So this is why I said, before I said, in 5 years, I'm going to do this. In 5 years, because the understanding that businesses have is that you're going to master something in that time frame. That's also why if you look at the SKAs, skills, knowledge, and abilities in a job rec, because they're broken out at the SKAs, they said, we're looking for someone with 5 years experience. Why? Because we don't want to train you. We want somebody who already knows how to do whatever it is that they're hiring for, right? So when you go into a situation, whether it's personal, a job, or as a contractor to run a business, and you're 33 years old, they're thinking she probably is really good at something. I were you, as I develop my business plan, even if I've never had a trucking company, there's probably things that you already know how to do, that you have more than 5 years experience, that is important and relevant to this business. And I would put that as part of the strength that you have for this business. Now you understand why I asked your age and how do you understand how many years it takes to master something? Because now I've filled you up with knowledge to say, I'm very organized. I can use spreadsheets. I can, whatever it is, if part of the business requires that, you know, however you word it, our strength, our position, why we're better than the next company is boom, 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 boom. You see my point?
Yeah.
And then as you begin to say, you're developing this business as a trucker or trucking business, and you say, look, I don't have 5 years or 10 years experience as a trucker, but my business is to run this business. I have more than 5 years of organizing a business and running it. I'm hiring people who only have 5 years or more experience, who have driving records that are, you know, you get a speeding ticket here and there. That's, nobody doesn't have a speeding ticket, but no crashes, no this, that, the other, no whatever that they don't want to see. So they're not judging you as a trucker. They're judging you as a person who can run a business, that one of their key assets are truckers, but those truckers have that experience. Now, over that time, you start driving the truck and you begin to become very good at it, et cetera. And all of a sudden now you have 5 years experience. Then you change the part where you say, we're going from good to very good. And oh, by the way, I'm not just a business that runs trucking, I'm a trucker myself. And they're like, damn, you see my point? And so now we're figuring out how to progress. Like I have female friends from California who drive 18-wheeler big rigs, females. And most people don't think about that.
Right.
So now what we're doing is when you put a business plan together, you're like, what do I bring to this business? And maybe some things a lot and some things a little. Then you figure out strategically, well, how do I organize my business? Because you remember, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what the customer thinks you are. They value you. They put a price. Whatever your salary is, they created it. Whatever you are as if you and I walk into a building called BMCC, bricks, doors, windows, do you know what made it a school?
No,
Who's my customer?
I don't know.
You.
No.
You're the customer to the administration. You're the customer to the professors. You're the customer to everybody. If you don't show up in the building and everyone else like you, it's a building with bricks, windows, and doors. When you walked in as a student, it became a school. My point is, your customers define who you are as a business. You have to figure out, which customers do I want? What do they want? And can I reflect what they want at a high enough level that they're willing to pay? You see my point?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Bye.
All right. SBA, if you decide to do that, put your business plan together and don't call them, just walk in the office. There's an office at Baruch on this, I think it's the second floor. So when you go into the main level, you go up the escalator and then you turn left and go at the end of the hall. That's where they are. I don't know where they physically are located, but they're also at Pace, and they're also, which is, you know, downtown near City Hall. And there's also a location at Columbia University at 113, 112 in Broadway. Because you are an American citizen that pays tax, you have free access to all three of those or any other office around the United States. It's yours. It's
All right.
your right to walk into any of those places.
So you said Baruch and Columbia, right?
And Pace.
And Pace. And do you happen to have a like a business plan template? or like somewhere I can get it where I could just look it up and figure it out?
So there may be one in the textbook under, so in your textbook, there's a chapter on entrepreneurship and a chapter on small business.
Okay.
I would look there first.
Okay.
I would
All
look
right.
Matter of fact, I get emails. I got one today from the one at Baruch. Hold on, let me just check to see if it's relevant to you. Momento, por favore. Where is it? What borough are you in?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. All right. So I don't know if there's an office at Brooklyn. Well, Brooklyn's huge. I don't know what part of Brooklyn you're in, but I mean, there's a couple of colleges
I'm
over
like-
there.
I'm like next to Queens. I'm like in the edge of Brooklyn and Queens.
Which Greenpoint?
No, over there by
That point?
Cypress Hills.
Cypress Hills. Well, I don't know if there's an office in Queens College. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, I wonder if there's one that's close to where you live, unless you don't have a problem coming into the city. But I just saw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a car. I can come to the city. It's not an issue.
All right. So
Yeah.
so I'll show you what I didn't even open this yet, but I'll show you what this is in case it's of interest to you. You see this? See, it says Field Center. Actually, it's the same thing as on here, Field Center. This actually comes in from Baruch. I don't know, and Baruch is having a lunch and learn series, entrepreneur lunch and learn workshop. Breaking.
Can I take a picture of that?
I'll just send you the link right now. Hold on.
Okay.
Michelle, I'm trying to see, because sometimes it's confusing what entrepreneurship is versus what small business is. But all right, hold on. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Give me one as it pops up. Oh no, they actually meet. Well, no, this is good. I'll just put this in there. Grab that and see if it opens up. I just want to make sure it's not linked to my email, that it's links, because it doesn't look like, it looks like it's just coming straight from Baruch.
What, did you send it to my iCloud email?
In the chat.
Oh, in the chat.
Yeah.
Let me see.
And I'm trying to see if this is a in person or a Zoom. It does. I mean, either way, you might be interested. So
Yeah, I am. It is.
you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it. There's a moment for many entrepreneurs to feel that they've reached a point of impact. Michelle. It
So,
doesn't say if it's in person or online.
Yeah, I don't know, because up here it says baruch.zoom.us. So I was wondering. Anyway,
It might be the Zoom, because if you look at it, it's a Zoom link.
that's what I'm saying. It says Zoom. Anyway, I would just fill it in and get the response back. It looks like it's today at. Oh crap! It's on now. I would do
I'm
it right.
about to.
I don't.
I'm
They
about
just
to
sent
do
it
it
to
right
me.
now.
They just sent it to me this morning. You're talking about last minute. Anyway, but the other thing is, whoever the woman is, let's say that you missed it or it's not relevant, contact her. Say, hey, look, I just got the message the day after class. I'm really interested in learning as much as I can. Can you talk to me for 15 minutes?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm about to launch the meeting now. It's allowing me to launch the meeting.
All right. I'm gonna
All
let
right,
you,
thank you,
you take
Professor.
care. All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Be well.